Please take your seats. The program will begin in 10 minutes. Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes.
Some see heroes. Others, only egos. We see the era of billionaire athletes. A fad to some, the future of money to others. We see crypto's trillion-dollar swings. The end of jobs, or the end of human struggle. We see the endless funds fueling the AI hype. While others follow the noise, we follow the money.
Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Momentum, migration, massive scale. The race for AI dominance is intensifying. With capital and code at the center of it all.
We are going to give you more powerful technology. There's going to be responsibility that goes along with that.
The latest frontier models. Vast energy needs.
Cool, we even announced that whopping $21 billion deal with Meta.
Everything in the world runs on NVIDIA.
Investor appetite and attention.
I think the future is about building many more higher quality things than we've ever built before.
The landscape is shifting beneath our feet. For business, it's all about growth, scale, disruption, and pressure to produce. But at what cost?
Some of the early companies that we gave this to said things like, this is a super weapon. You should have to own a gun license to use it.
Over the next 2 days, leading voices will descend on San Francisco to
decode the future. Welcome to Bloomberg Tech.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Emily Chang and Tom Giles.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, we're going to wake you guys up and decode the future while we're at it. Thank you so much for being here today. Always such a great day to do this in San Francisco, the center of AI, the center of technology.
This is always one of my favorite days of the year, Emily, because we are bringing together the foremost leaders in the tech landscape. We've got CEOs, investors, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and people who are literally building the future of AI, all under one roof. And it's also a place where we get to showcase the work of 90 reporters and editors who cover global technology for Bloomberg around the world. And on stage, we're gonna talk about the questions that they are grappling with, that you are grappling with, and that our guests are grappling with on the daily basis.
We're streaming live, so I want to welcome everyone else who's watching from around the globe. And we did kick this off last night with a dinner of C-suite IT executives. I sat down with Elizabeth Sohn, the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Netflix. Thought that was a really fascinating conversation. We talked about walking away from Warner Brothers, Ben Affleck. We talked about their intense, high-performing culture and how AI is changing all of that. It was really interesting.
And I got to talk with CEO of Cerebras, Andrew Feldman, and 3 takeaways from that conversation were, 1, data centers and how hard it is to get access to data centers. And we talked about some of the mistakes that the data centers builders made early on, failing to build relationships with communities, which is why you're getting some of the pushback. He said, in some instances, we were dopes. Two other things I want to highlight. Customer wins. He said, we're talking to everybody except NVIDIA in the AI ecosystem. And lastly, on demand, we're all worried about whether we're in a bubble. He said builders are so far behind demand, it's absurd. So he's an optimist.
We're going to talk a lot about AI today. I'm going to be sitting down with Fei Li. Yoshua Bengio is here. Our colleague Shireen Ghaffari will be interviewing him. You know, some of the godparents, as they're called, of AI. Tom, you're going to be talking to Hock Tan, the CEO of Broadcom, just about the massive resources and compute it takes to power.
Who's very much in the news today if you've looked at the stock market.
You're going to be talking about that. And just the pace of this technology, how fast things are changing. Daniela Amodei, the president and co-founder of Anthropic, is backstage. Meta's Alex Wang will be here. Mira Murati of Thinking Machines. I'll be sitting down with her. It's her first big interview in a year and a half. She hasn't done something like this since before she left OpenAI, so really excited about that one. And I do want to thank our sponsors, of course. Our presenting sponsors, Corient, Salesforce, and Samsung. Our supporting sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, the New York Stock Exchange, Okta, and Schneider Electric.
Thanks, Emily. And if you're enjoying the conversation or if you want to engage in it, we want to hear from you, and we want to hear from you on social. There's a couple of ways that you can do that using hashtag Bloomberg Tech. You can also tag your posts at Bloomberg Live. By now, we hope you've downloaded the app, the event app, and that will be your guidepost to all the essentials throughout the day.
So, without further ado, let's get started with the AI company of the moment. I don't think anyone can argue with that. It's Anthropic. There's a scary new model mythos. There's fights with the Pentagon. There's a potentially $1 trillion IPO. So please welcome President and co-founder of Anthropic, Daniela Amodei, and Shireen Ghaffari.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. And Daniela, thanks so much for talking to us today. We are really excited for this conversation. We were chatting about not so long ago when we first met and started covering Anthropic. But for those who aren't familiar, you and your brother Dario and a handful of other people left OpenAI to start Anthropic back in 2021. Now you employ thousands of employees, many of them in a reporting chain up to you, in your role as president. I'm curious, what is the difference in the leadership style between you and Dario?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here today. And, you know, Dario and I really think of how we sort of split duties. Dario is this incredible technical visionary. I think, you know, years before AI was this amazing idea that people were excited about around the world, he had this really strong conviction that artificial intelligence is going to be a big deal. This is like early 2010s. And I think Dario is constantly reminding the company about the scale, the ambition, sort of where the technology itself is going. I think of my role much more as actually running and managing the day-to-day of the organization. So I manage the executive team. We spend time making decisions about customers, about our products, about the research and how that applies to the people that are using artificial intelligence. And I like to think that the two of us are a great balance. And I have to say, like, I don't know how one CEO just runs a company by themselves. It seems like it's actually much easier to do with two people, particularly when they know each other really well.
I remember in one of our conversations earlier, you telling me that you and Dario rarely fight. And I'm curious how you manage, what are some examples of places where maybe you have disagreed and have been able to settle it in a healthy way with regard to the business?
Well, as someone who also has a brother, I know, I think we've had like several decades to kind of practice fighting and still loving each other, right? So as early as like, why did you take my toy? Can I have that back, please? I think that has served us well in being able to operate well together at Anthropic. I think what I would say is that, we do disagree sometimes, but I think how you disagree really matters. And I feel like there is always like an incredible mutual respect between us. So if we look at the same situation and we see something different, I like to think that what our default is to be curious, right? So I usually view it as like, oh, this felt like an obvious call to me. Like, why do you see it that way? Because usually he'll have a piece of information that I don't have, or I'll have a different perspective. And I would say about 80 to 90% of the time, what ends up happening is we meet in the middle. And so we'll think like, oh, I think this is the right thing to do. You think this is the right thing to do. Actually, there's probably a third way to do this. That's the combination of what we both think. That's actually a little bit better. I think that's part of the strength of having both of us. The ability to practice looking at situations and decisions just from different points of view and perspective. And I think it helps us make better decisions.
So 2 years ago, when you were sitting on the Bloomberg tech stage with Dario, Anthropic was still very much the underdog in the competition against OpenAI and just in the race to AI generally. Now it's in a very different position, no longer the underdog. Claude is a runaway success, particularly among coders. Your company is projecting $47 billion in annualized run rate revenue, and the company has eclipsed OpenAI's valuation for the first time. Do you feel like you're definitively the front runner right now, and how does that change your approach?
Something that I think both Dario and I really hammer at Anthropic is that is just completely the wrong way to think. I think our view has always been, this is really about how do we show up every day for our customers? How do we stay humble and make sure that we're really focused on the mission, right? The whole reason we started Anthropic is we want to be able to build and develop this technology in a way that is ethical, that's responsible, that's fair. And I think it's really incumbent upon everybody at the company, but especially leadership, to say, all of these numbers, they're actually not the point, right? We are really here to do a job. We're here to support the businesses that rely on us every day. AI is increasingly a bigger part of everybody's workflow, their experience at the office, their experience in their personal lives. That's a huge privilege and responsibility. And so I think if anything, we work really hard every day to say like, our job is to be the best version of who we can possibly be as a company every day. That takes work, that takes humility, that takes time, that takes focus and energy.
I want to talk about the big news earlier this week that Anthropic has filed confidentially for an IPO. SpaceX has also filed. OpenAI is expected to file anytime now. How far back had you been planning to file? And do you think that there's a race here to be first among the AI companies?
So yes, you're correct. We confidentially filed our S1, and that gives us the option to potentially go public after the SEC review. Unfortunately, that's all I can say about anything IPO related. I'm sure you understand.
I mean, if we can just maybe level up a little, what is the calculus for a kind of an AI company generally to go public or not in this moment? What are some of the pros and cons here? Because on the one hand, yes, you can access more capital if you're not a startup. But on the other, then you're beholden to quarterly results, shareholder calls, et cetera. So what are some of the pros and cons just generally for an AI startup, do you think, to go public in this moment?
So I think, at least speaking for ourselves, and I think ideally, probably really for the AI industry more broadly, it's a very capital-intensive business to train AI models. I think that's something we've been very open about from day one. I don't think that's a surprise in the industry. And I think this kind of concept of like, how do you access the level of capital that you need to train these models, right? It's a really big kind of upfront cost to train the models and to serve inference on them. And I think that is, my guess is that, over time, the sort of core set of companies that are working to advance the frontier are just going to need access to capital. And I think the public market is very well suited to that. So there's obviously, of course, trade-offs, but my sense is there's just a fundamental structure of how training and kind of serving these models for customers works, that it will require that level of access.
It's clear that many businesses can't get enough of Claude, but at the same time, We are hearing about some customers who are concerned about the pitfalls of so-called token maxing, of companies making leaderboards of who uses the most AI tokens for using AI's sake. One of Uber's executives talked about it getting harder to justify AI spend if there isn't a clear metrics-backed ROI. Do you think there's truth to the idea that some businesses may be overspending on AI tools in this early experimental phase, and they may cut back as they move out of that phase?
So I think kind of two things are true at once here. I think, I like that you said, experimental, because I think the reality is it feels like these AI tools are so powerful and so capable, which is true. And comparing them, particularly to, even 2 years ago when I was on stage at Bloomberg with Dario, I think the models have just come so far in what they're able to do and the economic value that they provide. But I actually think there's a lot more distance to go still for what the models will be able to do, 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 years in the future. And I would suspect that we will see some experimentation in different fields to understand how do you kind of get the most value out of these models for what particular workflows. I think the second thing that's true is, how businesses are choosing to use AI will change. So the use cases today, some of them I expect will continue to be kind of the primary driver of efficiency or creativity or new approaches to doing things within businesses, whether that's coding or financial services, legal, healthcare. But I also think as the industry as a whole, not just the AI industry, but really the business community gets more familiar with the tools, we're all going to learn together, like what is the best way to apply these tools that also supports employees. And so I think today there's this feeling that it's like, oh, like AI, the leaderboards, and it's like I have to use it, and what do I even use it for? And I think my hope is that over time, it'll be more incorporated into the day-to-day of how humans do our work, how we communicate together, and that there will actually be a lot more value realized in a way that feels really good to people.
Does Anthropic have a leaderboard itself?
We don't have a leaderboard, no, or at least not in the way you've described. We do track how much we're using Claude internally and for what use cases, because we really try to prototype all of the tools that we give to our customers. And so all of the products that you see, whether that's Claude Code, Claude Design, Cowork, like all of these are things that we actually built at Anthropic first, because we said, hey, this is a real need we have. Could Claude help us with this? And so I think it's important for us to just have a kind of a metric for checking, like how are we using it and how much are we using it? But there's not like you must use AI and you must use Claude and it's better if you use it or not.
What type of job function outside of coding or research are using Claude the most internally?
The entire company uses Claude for topics large and small. Probably the second biggest, I would actually say, is finance. And so a lot of the kind of back-end financial planning analysis, like just number analysis, I think Claude is really, really helpful at that. But honestly, like our people team built an incredible tool internally for how we do performance reviews that leverages Claude. We're in the middle of performance review season. I have to say, like the feedback from our team has been so positive. Claude, they're like, it just feels so much more fun to do this. It's so much more interesting, interactive. It's pulling in information about what I did over the course of the past 6 months when I'm assessing myself. And I think that it really just speaks to the generality of these tools. Their ability to, I think, reach across a business and just take a lot of information in and help you as an employee be more successful in your role.
Dario and Anthropic's leadership has been vocal about the need for more compute. Your company recently made a major deal with xAI to lease compute. There are others. OpenAI made a big splash sort of earlier on with securing huge data center deals and spending, up to $1 trillion on infrastructure. Why did Anthropic take a little bit of a different approach? And in hindsight, do you think you should have done more earlier on the compute front?
We've talked publicly about this concept of sort of the cone of uncertainty related to compute. And I think something that's important to know is the sort of structure of these deals is you have to commit to a certain amount of compute, reasonably far in advance. And so I think Anthropic's view has always been, we are wanting to plan for the best outcome, but not overextend ourselves such that we're buying more compute than we could productively use. It's really hard to predict that, perfectly. And I think we would much prefer to be on the side of having a little bit more demand for the product than we're able to serve, than the inverse where you overshoot and then you're actually like not in a great situation because you've bought something, you can't pay for it down the road. It is really hard to get this right. I think the industry as a whole is still grappling with how to kind of structure these deals, but I think my sense is it's impossible to know what the future will look like. On balance, I continue to think it's better to be fiscally responsible and think carefully about how much you're going to buy, make sure that you have the ability to actually use all of that compute in the future, and we'll probably undershoot or overshoot at some point a little bit.
In the announcement with SpaceX, Anthropic expressed preliminary interest in using potential data centers in space. What do you think about that? Is that a reality, and how far out are we from that?
I don't think that data centers in space are something that will be on our to-do list in 2027. But I will say AI is the field that has surprised me the most. It's probably surprised the world the most in terms of just what new things are made possible by the advent of this technology. So no immediate plans for working with the astronauts to get Space Center data centers going, but you never know.
A few months ago, Anthropic had a very public battle with the Pentagon over restrictions on its AI software. Are you more or less optimistic today about finding a solution to that?
Anthropic has been really leaned in from day one and talked very publicly about our commitment to national security. And we were the first AI company available on the top secret cloud. I think our commitment to these values and these principles are also very, very old, right? It's sort of not a new thing for us. But I have to say, I've been very impressed the degree to which we've been able to work productively, with the administration around a wide variety of topics. And I think that's actually been the much bigger story over a long period of time, is our ability to partner productively with government at all kinds of levels. Because fundamentally, I think artificial intelligence is and will be a geopolitical issue. And in order to be an ethical and responsible lab, we need to work with governments around the world, in the US, but also in partner countries, to say, how can we roll this technology out in a way that's safe, in a way that's good for people, that's going to protect democracy. And so I do really feel optimistic about this in the long run.
Do you think other companies like OpenAI or Google have been able to negotiate better deals with the government because of Anthropic sticking to its position?
I think every individual company is going to have their own stance and sort of their own principles about like what their red lines and what their values are. And my sense is Anthropic will always be as open as we can be about what our principles and values are, why we have those principles. But ultimately, I think it's important that whatever those values are for you as a company, that you are true to them. That you feel like you can explain them to employees and to the world more broadly. And fundamentally, we can't really control what other businesses are going to do. I think Anthropic's role is to be the sort of best version of itself. Again, to say like, if we were the only organization in this situation, how would we want to behave? I think that's really the best way we've been able to navigate many difficult decisions at the company over the years.
I think philanthropy seems to be a big part of Anthropic's culture. I know you and many Anthropic co-founders have pledged to give away half of your equity. Is that right?
80%.
80% of your equity. I'm curious, would you be in support of something like the proposed billionaire tax ballot in California that would impose a one-time tax on individuals whose net worth exceeds $1 billion?
So Anthropic has, I think, again, pretty publicly talked about the fact that we think AI is going to create a huge amount of wealth. We're already seeing that. And I think we've been pretty open about this idea that should be redistributed in some fashion. Both the pledge and then a lot of sort of views of Anthropic when we're talking about potential for labor displacement are really grounded on this belief that if we don't take intentional actions, AI, like many technologies, will probably widen the gap of inequality and disparity. That's not what we want to see. So I think there are a lot of interesting suggestions kind of floating around for how to approach that. Of course, the part we can control is, what do we as a company and as individuals, as co-founders, sort of choose to do with, any, economic benefits that we get from AI. But I think this is a really big and important question that actually goes beyond the walls of any individual company.
There's a lot of potential upside with AI to cure disease or lower the cost of consumer goods, but also real fears that, Dario has validated, saying last year that AI could potentially wipe out half of all white-collar work. Do you agree with that? And if so, what's the solution? Is it something like more taxes? We talked about basic income, job retraining, and how do you pay for all of that?
Sorry. I think AI we're already seeing the ways that it's disruptive. I don't necessarily think we know the future. So exactly what the type of disruption that might happen, a year or 3 years or 5 years from now is unknown. I do think it's important for companies to be open about and study what we're seeing today, which is part of why we publish our societal impacts research. We say, hey, here is how people are using AI. Is it displacing jobs? Is it supplementing jobs? What we found so far is that in 2025 and 2026, replacement is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what AI is doing. And really where we see that is mostly in jobs that are overseas and mostly in customer support. And so these are jobs that are sort of already being automated by more traditional ML, non-generative AI systems. Could that change in the future? Absolutely. And I think we're a little bit unusual in the sense that we talk about it a lot. We say, hey, this might happen. But I think there is this just broader, again, sort of societal challenge. AI is going to be able to do so many productive things that humans can do today. What does that mean for how we find meaning, how we earn income, how we relate to one another? And again, I think the default will be to treat it like past technologies and say, okay, we're going to integrate this into existing workflows, and that's sort of the end of the story. I personally believe there's a real opportunity here for us to say, how do we accelerate and sort of accentuate the parts of doing work and finding meaning that only humans can do? I have this very fundamental belief that humans like to spend time with other humans. We like to create things together. We like to relate to one another. Sometimes we like to disagree with each other. And I don't think AI will fundamentally take that away from us, but we have to figure out how we apply that within the existing economic infrastructure so that people can still find meaning in their work and so that people have a way to earn a livelihood. Again, I think there could be a lot of different ways to structure that, but I think this is an important moment for us generally as a society to say, like, what are the lives that we want humans to be able to live, and how do we work closer towards that future?
2 months ago, Anthropic unveiled and restricted access to Mythos, your most powerful model, right, citing significant concerns about its potential to wreak havoc on critical software by spotting and exploiting security vulnerabilities. Now, Anthropic plans to release these Mythos-level AI models more widely. Can you help us understand what's changed in the past 2 months? Are you confident that these models are different now in any meaningful way from the version before? Are they safer?
This is a great question. We actually, on Tuesday, just expanded the set of customers that have access to Mythos. I think it's about an additional 150 organizations around the world in 15 different countries. And really our approach to Mythos has always been, there's a time component to it. So we released it initially to cyber defenders. So some nonprofit groups, some governments, some organizations that are critical infrastructure for protecting against potential cyber attacks. And what we found is, just like in any kind of security vulnerability situation, you have to give the defenders a head start. The technology, AI models are going to keep advancing. If it's not us, one day releasing a Mythos-level model, another AI company will. But it actually matters who you give access to first and how long they have to patch some of the vulnerabilities that Mythos was capable of revealing. And so we're taking this very cautious, very tiered approach, which I know in some ways is frustrating because people really want access to the model. But I think again, as a company that's founded on these principles of being ethical, being responsible, we felt it was important to give access to the organizations that were capable of really helping us defend against some of these risks, and then slowly widening that circle to more and more critical infrastructure until eventually we feel it's safe to release it more widely.
So far, Anthropic has been very focused on enterprise, even in how you're talking about that rollout. But could we see a push into consumer this year?
So we do have a consumer product. It's Claude.ai, and I think we have always really from day one felt that enterprise and business is the best kind of spiritual fit for Anthropic and our values. I think this focus on trust, on responsibility, reliability, transparency, these are just so baked into the DNA of Anthropic, the company. And I think we have a increasingly growing consumer base. It mostly looks like professionals and individuals that are using AI for productive uses. So it doesn't necessarily have to be work. Sometimes it is, but it's often for advancing your own skills and knowledge, whether that's in a hobby or helping. I'm a mom, right? Helping me organize applications for preschool when my son was younger. I mean, Claude is so powerful in being able to just help abstract away some of the administrative duties of just being a person. But I think the difference to us in our consumer product, maybe compared to competitors, is it's not an entertainment tool. We're not using it for people to sort of have fun and have it be this it can be fun to use it, but it's really for kind of productive activities, whether those are at work or at home. And I believe that is going to continue to be a reasonably large number of people that wants to use that product and service, even though enterprise is our primary focus.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. Oh, yeah. Waters.
Please welcome to the stage Mary C. Daly, President and CEO at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde.
I am so excited for this conversation. I've upped my suit game because I'm alongside the one and only Mary Daly. And following straight on from Daniela, it is so fascinating to see how she thinks about already whether there's data showing the labor force displacement. She talked about it being overseas. She really talked about how we're thinking of purpose. So I give you the two choices. A choice of abundance and utopia, or one of existential crisis and risk. Where does Mary Daly, or where does the San Francisco Fed sit on where the economy is? Utopia or demise through AI?
Well, like most things in the world, neither of the extremes are usually useful as good descriptors of where we're likely to end up. So I think ultimately the future that we create is our decision. Technology doesn't make choices. It's a tool and is a powerful tool, but we need to make the choice of where we want to be. And I think they touched on it in the last panel. Daniela talked about that, about how you have to think about what do you want this to do for you and what do you want a life that comes from it. And that's where we are. So I'm enthusiastic about what the models and tools can do, but I do believe strongly that we all need to appreciate what we need to do with it and how we need to help everyone come along. Otherwise, the world of the doomsayers versus the enthusiasts gets determined by things outside of us, and really we want to harness it. I always tell people, technology can harness you or you can harness technology. I think we should be in the driver's seat and not the passenger seat here.
So when you're thinking about the driver's seat of how can you get the closest data, whether it be macro, whether it be anecdotal, as to what is actually happening, how people are harnessing it or not, where are you turning to?
I'm really turning to businesses and asking them, what are you doing? And not the technology businesses, the businesses that are going to determine whether this is as transformative as many think it will be, or whether it's just a cost-effective play that makes you better at doing your past jobs, but you're not going to be creating new opportunities. And I'm already seeing very clear signs that businesses are asking not the question of how can I use it to simply do things faster, better, cheaper, but but how can I do things differently? What did I never think I could do in my business that now I have the capacity to consider? And one of the CEOs we talked to said, we've thought we were going to be thinking about costs, and now we're thinking about revenue. And I said, well, tell me more what that means. He said, we thought we were a business that did this, and now we know we can be a business that does this. And we can bring, our design. We don't have to go and get designs to do our machine tooling. We can build our designs because we can use model-assisted work, and we can change how we think about agriculture to make it have better yields and less disease, and importantly, bring prices down for consumers should all of that come through. So it's one of these things where I see people tackling the technology that they thought they needed to learn to keep up, and now they're thinking about how do I use it to grow. That's what we do.
I just want to bring that chart back again, because I don't know if the audience, and this is where Mary Daly's so fascinating, because she reads the data, but she also wants to hear from you. So please send us your audiences questions. I want to be seeing them and integrating them with our conversation. But look at this, the adoption rate that we've seen by sector. Of course, information, IT's out front, the professional services. Look at poor old government. But I'm sure in many ways, that's because you're restricted. There are governance more in place on government use and adoption. How is the San Francisco Fed using AI in these tools?
The Federal Reserve is taking a system approach because we are part of a Federal Reserve system. And so we've really worked hard all the way back when ChatGPT first came out. The first thing we have to do is say, you're not allowed to use these technologies to do your work because we're in a confidential environment and we have ring fences. I know all the private sector companies started thinking about that. But then we quickly realized that it's an important tool. For the whole time I've worked at the Fed, which is longer than I now talk about anymore, but my whole career, it's really been about being not the first out there taking risks, but the next out there being thoughtful about how technologies could be used elsewhere, because we have to study the economy, we have to know how financial institutions could use them, but we're also really committed to being good fiduciary stewards of public funds. So we want to be using technologies that can make work more efficient, more effective, more resilient. But we're recognizing constantly, even though you're right, we are regulated, but we're also self-regulating in this way. We are fiduciary stewards of public funds, but also fiduciary stewards of public trust. So we're always balancing how do we continue to modernize while we're making sure we're safe and we're sound and we're doing our work well with a human in the loop. That's what we always think about. Humans got to be in the loop.
Well, then for us humans who are wondering how we bring it more into our personal life, into our professional lives, but how we bring others along, what are you seeing in adoption rates within those that you work with, not just those that you're going out and talking to? How are you seeing your own colleagues feeling empowered to use it or feeling totally distrustful of it?
Well, we've been on this journey for a while. All the way back starting in 2023 and thinking about this in San Francisco. We've got lots of ambassadors for this, but on any growth curve or maturity curve, there's the early adopters, the enthusiasts. I'm probably one of those. I'm using all the models I can get on my private device, thinking about how I can do practice. Can I run my equations that I've written down much faster? Can I estimate models better? Can I code faster? All of this type of thing. But the important thing is we quickly built a sandbox in the Fed where we can do these things safely and people can practice. Well, that means that it's not just the leaders who are using it and saying you must use it or you should use it. It's actually ground up as well. And so there's the enthusiasts, the early adopters, and then you bring the others along. And I would say that we have, and I feel proud of this at the system level, we have taken this as it's the individual's responsibility to invest in him or herself, but it's also the organization's responsibility to make sure we're training the workplace that's ready for tomorrow, not just the workplace that's ready for yesterday. And so thinking about how we enterprise train people on these tools in a safe and sound way, making good judgments. It's also, you don't need generative AI for every single task. We've long been using machine learning and robotic process automation. You can use older technologies like those, which seemed new and cool before. You can use those older technologies to do your work well. And so I think it's just a matter of helping people in our organization. We've got widespread adoption at this point, helping people understand that when you get down to it, it's not just about learning a tool, it's about seeing how it can benefit you. And one of the ways we think that we can change business processes is have people who are actually in the work innovate within that space, but do it in a safe and sound way by having a group of people take a look at that and say, do we want to take this to scale across the enterprise?
Yeah.
Or is this just a one-off thing that was nice to experiment, but it's not going to give ROI?
Well, ROI is it's so front and center, has been for the last couple of years, and still we're waiting for that tangible data that shows that productivity is really at an inflection point. And from your perspective, is it about the reskilling, the training, from a government perspective, a public perspective, a private, me as an individual perspective, that's holding us back? Why haven't we seen it in the data?
Well, the very first thing to know is that there's this famous phrase that productivity growth is everywhere except in the data. The data itself at the aggregate level that we collect, that's a true thing that was said by Robert Solow. It's just like, this is important because it always happens, where the productivity growth is starting to take place, the productivity gains, but in order for that to get to the aggregate level, it has to be across a wide group of individuals and firms. So we are seeing evidence in particular firms, in particular sectors, where you're already seeing those gains. But we haven't seen it at scale yet, in part because if you think back to, I'm going to use an historical example. They're not perfect guides, but I think it's useful. Think of electrification. We had electricity for a long time before we got the rapid productivity growth that came from electrification. The change wasn't that we knew how to use electricity. We had that. The change was that instead of just putting the electric motor at the end of a factory line that was once powered by steam, where you saved costs for energy, but the line looks identical, the unit drive came in, and they could make machines with specific motors for themselves, and they could rearrange the factory anytime they wanted, and then transformative things happen. What's the key? It's business process change that generates sustained productivity gains, and firms are just at the early stages of learning the technology, using the technology, and then thinking, how do I change my business so it doesn't actually look the way it once did? For that, you need workforce, you need investment, you need learning, and then, of course, as Daniela mentioned, the models are changing so quickly, the capabilities, that most of the firms we talk to don't want to just take one thing and say, that's our new, because they know 6 months, 1 week from now, things could be totally different.
I mean, what hasn't changed and has been relentless for a couple of years has just been the wall of money coming into the AI picks and shovels, the infrastructure build out. Is that showing up in an inflationary pressure perspective? We keep talking about bottlenecks, about memory prices. How is that affecting from a macro perspective?
So we haven't seen those particular things. Certainly that's a concern. And if you go to particular places where data centers are being built, you can get information about how it's harder to get construction workers because they're all being moved there, or there's a demand for construction workers that might outstrip. But for the construction workers, it's a boom, right? This is a good thing. And of course, we need more pipe fitters and welders and all the things that we thought for a long time we didn't need. Now we know we do need them. And community colleges in particular are training a lot more people to do those types of jobs. But we haven't seen that drive the inflation numbers that everyone's worried about. The number one concern when we talk to people in communities, you can see it in the Gallup surveys, et cetera, is inflation. But inflation's really being driven by just the ongoing, we're trying to get inflation down to 2%, of course, but then we have the tariffs, and those are rolling through and hopefully rolling off. The effects of the tariffs rolling through and rolling off by the end of the year. But then we have the oil prices, which are pushing up overall energy costs, and of course, food prices as well. So those are the things people seem much more worried about than the data centers. It certainly has caused some supply gaps between the things that power electric plants, the chips, et cetera. But I don't think that's really the main driver in any way of inflation right now.
But of course, your mandate remains steady prices, it remains financial stability. And we've got a great audience question here saying, how do you think in the longer term AI will affect your mandate?
I don't think of it as affecting our mandates. Our mandates are given to us by Congress. And so let me just say they're full employment and price stability. And those are always affected by how the economy grows, how fast it can grow, what the underlying aspects of it. And so what many people are wondering right now in that particular mandated goals is in the next year, will AI itself affect our specific decisions that we're making as we navigate this? And I say, you always are thinking about what the potential of the economy is, but we also, if you're a policymaker, you have to think about what's really happening today, and there it's oil prices and other things. And then there could be this idea that maybe the job market won't be as robust as it's been in the past because AI will do so much. So far, we have seen mostly AI, generative AI, being used to augment workforce rather than replace workforce. Now, it is absolutely true that if coding is easier, you won't need as many coders. But what we're hearing from firms that use coders is they're hiring new coders, new types of coders. So net hiring's going up or hasn't fallen very much. It's just the skills you need are different. And so the responsibility for all of us is to think, how do we provide training for people so that and it's not going to be like any one component. You're going to have individuals saying, I want to invest in myself and learn these new skills. Companies saying, well, how do we mobilize our workforce by providing training? And the public sector asking, what do we need for our nation? And I think those three things together, individual, private, and public, together thinking about what's our journey forward as we make sure this workforce is ready, and that anyone who used to do this job and now has to do these kinds of things can prepare themselves to do those.
Dare I push us into the 5-10-year landscape? And what we're hearing from your new Fed chair, Mr. Walsh, is that maybe it could be deflationary in the longer term. It could be,
absolutely.
Are you abiding by that, you think?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's true about technologies is when you invest in them, the investment comes first, right? You have to invest in the capital, the infrastructure, the technology itself, and then you invest in the people so that they're ready. And investments often compete for resources. Yeah. That is the early part. Then the next stage is, where do you start to get the gains? But if it is as transformative as some of the other technologies have been that we call transformative in our history, then you absolutely start seeing productivity gains, and that means the pie grows faster, and things can fall in value and fall in prices, and inflation can be deflationary. And the timing is really what matters. So, you talked about the 5- and 10-year landscape. We're talking about the 12-month landscape when we're thinking about policy decisions we have to think about today. And then we're thinking about the 5 and 10 of where we're heading. And you go back to the periods in history where the Fed has had to grapple with these technological changes. I started at the Fed in the mid-90s when we were grappling with how much would computerization, the internet, create opportunities to hold prices back. And so those are the kinds of things that we are doing right now, but I don't think that's the pressing issue today. Today, inflation's above target for different reasons, but going forward, we definitely have to think about this.
In the news, unfortunately, we're thinking about the next day or the next week. This time next week, we know that SpaceX is going to be pricing. We've got a wall of money desperately trying to come into these public companies. We've got assets at near record highs, if not at them. Is that ever a cause for concern for you or the Fed?
You know what, we certainly, the Federal Reserve System, you can see that we release twice a year our quantitative surveillance kind of summary, but essentially we're always watching financial stability issues, but we are asking these questions. This is a question I ask. What is the value of the work being done behind that? And I think it's really hard to trace back and say that the technologies that people are investing in aren't valuable. We see them in your personal life. I'm sure all of you, if you're at a tech conference, are using AI, for your personal life and your business, et cetera, just thinking about it. And the more you use it and this rate of change you see it making, the more you recognize there's a possibility. So I think there's there, right? Is there potentially some, change
Bubble?
I do not use, there's two words I don't use, and I'm not saying them, but one of them is that word.
What's the other?
It starts with an R, and so, but seriously, we don't talk about these things. No, in all seriousness, I think that it's, think about the conversations we're having, and a lot of times you see you hear conversations about AI is going to save everything. Nothing else will ever be bad again because we have AI. And on the other side of it, you hear AI is going to destroy everything. You also hear that, oh my gosh, it's a B word. Oh my gosh, it could cause this word. Nobody will work. And I just would caution all of us from staying at these extremes, because the hard work, the work that is going to determine what our future looks like with this technology, is all in the middle. It is nowhere in their extremes. It's about thinking, okay, if we use this and these people don't do these jobs anymore, what do they do? And if you look back on history and you wonder, why did technologies have a negative outcome on society when over time they had a positive outcome, electrification? It's often because the people who were being displaced didn't have an opportunity to grab another rung. And I think it's really incumbent on all of us to think, how do you enable opportunities so people can grab another rung? And how do you harness the technology so it can do work that we haven't been able to do, or thinking we haven't been able to do, you know? And every week you open the news and you see another thing that AI has done for us that has made our lives potentially better. So let's not lose sight of that, while we also don't lose sight of what has to be done by all of us in order to make sure this is a positive rather than a negative experience.
Reality, responsibility, and we're never going to mention the other R word. It is wonderful to be with you, the Fed President of San Francisco. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course, Mary Daly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Federico Casaleño, Executive Vice President of Design at Samsung Electronics, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Kate Moriarty.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Moriarty, Deputy Editor for Bloomberg Media Studios, and I'm here with Federico Casaleño, who's the Head of Design at Samsung Electronics. I'm the head of the Samsung Design Innovation Center. Welcome, Federico.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And we're here for Samsung Sponsor Spotlight, Computational Design in the Age of AI. And I really want to talk about the idea that AI is transforming not only the products we use, but how those products are designed in the first place. And Federico, I'm really excited for us to be discussing just how AI and intelligent computing are helping designers experiment faster, test more possibilities, and ultimately create more human-centered experiences. So to start, we're really living in this time of extraordinary technological acceleration. And I'm curious to hear, how does Samsung ensure that it's staying focused on the human experience in its approach to design?
Well, thank you. That's a great question and very relevant, because we see definitely an explosion of technologies and the way we use AI across a variety of activities. But what I would say is, first of all, our mission remains unchanged, which basically is that we start by really understanding people, lifestyle, culture, behaviors, people's dreams and aspirations, and then we're trying to design for that. So that's remained a very strong North Star for us. And in the way I put it is, technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. So humans are always in the center. The second point is, in our design organization, we used to think AI as enabled by EI and HI. So artificial intelligence enabled by emotional intelligence and human imaginations, where basically the designer and the creative teams are always in the center of the process, and we always have the human in the loop. Finally, let's say for my training, I am a social scientist, a designer by training. I spent more than 20 years then at MIT teaching, but what I'm saying is that really I've always been trained to focus on people first. And even though we're passionate about technology, we always strive technology for what technology should do rather than for what technology can do.
And I understand that Samsung applies computational design to product development. I'd love if you could tell us, what is computational design and what's that process?
Well, first of all, computational design, we can say, is a process, is a method where we apply AI, machine learning, advanced computing in developing our products, in particular, developing our wearable. So is a method, is a process that enables us to make data-driven, science-driven decisions into our product development. So that's the first high-level definition. If we look at the process, I would say we have 4 steps, if we can summarize. First, build your database. So we need to collect data about people. We create digital twins of people, collecting 3D data, 4D data across a variety of demographics to cover the whole population, ethnicities, genders, ages, and so on. Secondly, we also collect data about qualitative data, like fat, bone, skin, etc., in order to really have an accurate set of data. So step number 1, build your database. Step number 2 is define your KPIs. Are you designing for comfort, for fit, for wearability, to improve sensing? So really define your KPI and what you want to achieve with that. 3 is train your models. We use our data to train our models in order to have very accurate tools that we can use in our process. And finally, point number 4 is really about simulate and iterate. So basically what we do, we run tons of simulation, thousands of simulation into our products in the digital environment. So we have digital simulations on our digital twins that we use, and then we bring the information and what we learn back into the design process where engineering teams, design teams can really take advantage of that. But we don't only use digital simulations, we also use robots, for example. So you can have a digital representation of a human running with a watch, and then you take this behavior and you bring it into a robot and you do other simulations. And finally, we simulate with humans. So you have digital simulation in the digital environment, you have robotic simulation and human testing. And this combination really empower our designer to make decisions based on data and fast simulation.
It's fascinating. And you and your team are really applying this every day. Could you bring to life some examples where computational design is really shaping product development?
Well, definitely we are bringing this to all our products. So for example, how do we design buds? Our human ears are like fingerprints, are unique, are very diverse. It's a very complex design challenge. And we use computational design, for example, to improve the ear tips in order to increase the coverage so more people feel comfortable with their ear. We use computational design to refine the head and the geometry to make it more stable, to fit better, and feel more comfortable. So basically, Buds 4 is where we have applied computational design to increase the quality of the product. We use it for watch, for example, to improve the way we design the sensors and how the sensor improves the capabilities to be more precise. We use it for the strip. We use it to design the holes in order to improve the hole distribution dimension and so on. So basically, also for watch, we have utilized computational design to improve comfort, fit, and wearability.
Very nice. And always great to have that live example, really bring it to life. And I'd love to end with a look ahead. How do you see this approach to design evolving, and what does its future look like?
Well, on one end, we see the increasing availabilities of data. In our case, we curate our database in a unique way, so we have an incredible amount of data that we can use. For the buds, we have done thousands of simulations. We have used millions of data points. So data availability is increasing, the power of computing is increasing, and there are at least 2 ways we receive computational design moving forward. Number 1, definitely into the incremental innovation of our product portfolio. We can improve the quality of the wearable that we have today in a way to make it even more comfortable, fit better, wear better. We improve the sensing. So incremental innovation powered by the AI is one, but two, exponential innovation. Thanks to that collaboration between AI and emerging technologies, we can have our teams creating and thinking new products that are unconceivable right now, that we cannot even think in today. So we can really open the boundaries of innovation. So in that sense, we can keep designing products for people, but our mission is not change. Technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. And our mission is really to design better products for people that use our products and to drive our decision by science and data.
Wonderful. Well, it's an exciting time, and we're excited to see what's ahead. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Trae Stevens, co-founder and executive chairman at Anduril Industries, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow.
To this a lot. You and I talk often.
Yes.
But it's always pretty fast and on a specific piece of news. But you are the executive chair of Anduril, and then you have this complete even split with being one of the 12 investing partners at Founders Fund. And we probably get to talk about the Founders Fund part a little bit less, I'd say. So we'll try and do an even split with this. You're a busy guy. You know, I think the stated intention of our conversation was to probably talk about defense technology in the current context of the war in Iran. To start with there, and explaining the basics of what Anduril is, you know, what role has Anduril played to date in that conflict, or not, and what is the current role of Anduril as part of the defense apparatus of this nation? I think that's a big question for you to kick us off with. I'll sit back and you take it away. Thank you.
That's really meaty.
Yeah.
So when we started Anduril 9 years ago, almost exactly actually, June 6th of 2017, so we're coming up on 9 years, the idea was that, you know, we have this defense ecosystem that's dominated by a handful, 5 or 6 large defense companies that have been, you know, kind of a consolidation of the entire defense industry that existed during the Cold War. And the capabilities that we have are really incredible. I mean, we have these amazing, exquisite defense systems like, you know, Ford-class aircraft carriers and the Joint Strike Fighter, the F-35, the Patriot missile. These platforms take decades to develop, build, and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to sustain. So for example, like a Patriot missile, which was initially developed in 1969, this is like kind of the creme de la creme of interceptors for counter-air capabilities. You know, this is like it's a 70-year-old system at this point. Every missile costs millions of dollars, literally like between $2.25 to $5 million
on a per unit basis.
Per unit basis. And these were built to shoot down MiG-29s. You know, when you're shooting at an airplane that costs tens of millions of dollars, you can afford to shoot a $3 million missile to do that. This is not the nature of threats as they exist today. And so Anduril, when we came on the scene, our goal was to figure out ways that we can introduce software, autonomy, on the production side of the house as well as on the kill chain, the tactical side of the house, to massively reduce the cost of engaging with a modern threat profile. And so when you look at something like the war in Iran, most of the threats that we're seeing are low-flying cruise missiles or Shaheds, which is sort of like a loitering munition. These are, you know, generally pretty slow, but they're, you know, mobile, dynamically controlled. You don't want to shoot a $3 million cruise missile at a $200,000 weapon. The economic trade-off is bad. And so, you know, we originally started working entirely in kind of the surveillance reconnaissance space, and now the kind of plurality of a lot of our work is actually related to air defense, lowering the cost of engaging with threats that are incoming to not only the United States, but also our allies and partners in the regions around the world where these threats are most present.
That's an interesting point on not just the United States, because there are deployments of Anduril technology in the Gulf, as an example. You yourself, you have been and will go very soon to the Middle East. How does that work in practice, being an American company that serves the U.S. military and the Department of Defense, but also allies? You must spend a lot of time meeting with the defense apparatus and governments of other nations.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's like one of the most common questions we get on ethics. These are important questions from new employees, younger people that are talking about joining. They'll lean forward very dramatically and say, how do you make decisions about where we sell our capabilities? And I'm like, well, it turns out there's this whole thing called foreign military sales. Yes. That actually the United States government decides where our things get sold. So those are very clear rules. It's not like I'm making a decision about like, oh, I really think we shouldn't sell to this country. It's like, well, yeah, the government has already kind of pre-decided that that's the case. But yes, it is important for U.S. foreign policy in a bipartisan way. This is not a partisan issue. In a bipartisan way, it's important for U.S. foreign policy to provide capabilities to our allies to make sure that they are fully integrated into our joint operations, which is really important, but also that they have the capabilities to defend themselves utilizing U.S. production that may or may not exist in many of these countries. Like they don't, our allies, many of them, are not going to fund and build a 5th-generation fighter plane on their own, nor are they going to develop really complex, multi-million-dollar counter-air missile systems. And so this is a role that we play in the ecosystem, is to go out and say, to countries like Ukraine or like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Qatar, hey, the United States has the capability. We want you to have that capability as well. And this is how we're thinking about the cost curve for deploying these capabilities and kind of the layered approach that you can take to reducing the cost per intercept or whatever it is. Now, the tricky thing about all this is that there's a big difference between being a startup that is designing and developing a capability, which is great, and there's a lot of really interesting efforts that are happening there, and being a producer of those capabilities. And this has really been the name of the game for Anduril over the last few years, is transitioning out of just being like a really innovative technology company and focusing almost all of our effort on how do we produce at scale in a way that allows us to not only supply the US customer, which is our primary customer, but also be supportive of that foreign policy mission and supplying those same capabilities abroad. So this is really about manufacturing and production more than almost anything else.
That takes us to Ohio, right? So in January of 2025, you guys phoned me and said, come to Ohio. This is where our next facility will be, Arsenal 1. Remind me, there's a reason there's a 1 next to it. We should get to that in a second. But fast forward, present day, production is underway. You built that place incredibly quickly. What is it doing? And why Ohio, I think? Why did you settle on that state and that specific location?
Yeah, I mean, again, transitioning from a startup where you're hiring a bunch of very well-compensated, software engineers and things like that to build things, to a world where we're producing with, a very different type of labor force, a very different type of skill set that's required. We recognized that we needed to go to a place where we were going to have the ability to scale, like our footprint, literally, that there was going to be enough workforce, skilled labor, that had manufacturing experience to fill out that footprint, and in a place that we felt like we could get the on-the-ground support from the local government, from the economic development organizations to do this as rapidly as we possibly could.
You know Ohio well as well. That helped.
I know Ohio well. It didn't help. I want to be clear. I'm from Ohio originally. When we narrowed it down to our last 3 locations, I sort of recused myself from the process because I'm like, man, if we pick Ohio, everyone's going to think I put my thumb on the scale. And then at the launch event that you were at, Governor DeWine got up and he said, first off, I'd like to thank Trae's mom. And I was like, oh, man, you're blowing the whole narrative here. But yeah, I think Ohio is this incredible place for manufacturing, has a long, long history in manufacturing. Just in my family alone, between my uncles and my grandfathers, we have worked at Ford, General Motors, Frigidaire, National Cash Register, Luxor Exotica. I mean, there's a tremendous history of manufacturing. But much of that evaporated. We had a sort of a bipartisan policy around globalization for decades. And it's really easy from sitting on the coast, whether you're in New York or San Francisco, to kind of forget about what happened in the middle of the country during that 20, 30-year run, starting in the early 90s. But every single one of those companies that I just mentioned no longer has factories in Ohio. And there's a lot of people that have been fighting for their lives to find employment. And some of that's coming back now. I think DeWine's administration has done a great job of incentivizing companies like Anduril to come in to build new factory campuses. So it's kind of catching back up. There's some wind in the sails, and we're really excited for what we're going to be able to do there.
Anduril has had growth in lots of different ways, right? The valuation that you've grown the company to, but also the footprint. We're short on time, so I want to just address the Arsenal 1 thing. It indicates that there is going to be an Arsenal 2 and an Arsenal 3. Is that in the United States, or is it time now where Anduril says, okay, well, if we're serving Western allies, we should maybe manufacture locally to where our technology is deployed?
I think it's both, actually. Okay. Arsenal 1 is primarily going to be focused on production of Fury, which is our collaborative combat aircraft, basically an autonomous fighter plane. Initial units will be rolling off the line this summer, so that production is already underway in the first 800,000 square feet that we have up and running. Later this year, we're going to start doing Barracuda, which is our low-cost cruise missile, and Roadrunner, which is our reusable interceptor missile. Both of those will start coming out of Arsenal 1 in Ohio as well. But there are other factories that are going to come online. Some of those are domestic shipyards that we're building out. There could be additional production facilities in the United States. Right now, we have 16 production facilities across the United States, which some of those are being consolidated back into that Ohio footprint. The United States is not the only country that has a national prosperity agenda. Obviously, all of these countries want to see increased investment in their, local economy. And so we feel very aligned in making sure that as we go in and we do some of these larger deals to bring those capabilities to bear, with our allies and partners, we want to build that local production piece to feed back into their economic growth as well.
Final one on Anduril, because we've probably spent more time on Anduril than I expected, but a lot of people that know Anduril, they know Palmer Luckey. Mm-hmm. You're the executive chair, Palmer is CTO, a co-founder, there are other co-founders, and then Brian is the CEO. And I mean this with massive respect, but I guess Brian, until quite recently, got less of the limelight. How does it work between the three of you and Matt and others that are running the company? How do you divide responsibility and decisions?
Yeah, Anduril, because of the way that we approach our business, we have many business lines. We have dozens of SKUs, different products that we sell, and almost every single one of those is a scaled startup in its own right. And so there's no way that this company could be run with a kind of a very light or thin executive team. We've focused really intentionally on building as deep of a bench as we can. And that has been, honestly, the most important asset to the company since the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So across the 4 co-founders, we've kind of divided the world up into pieces, and we each have different chunks of accountability. Palmer is incredibly talented at what Palmer does. The Palmer Show, as many people who have interacted with Palmer know. Brian is naturally more introverted, but he is the boss. Yeah. He is the chief executive officer. His say is the final say. And it is actually required, really, Palmer and I pushing him out the door a little bit to say, look, yes, you need to be out engaging, because his natural tendency as an engineer, he's the most brilliant software engineer I've ever worked with in my career. His personal preference would be, I just want to sit back and work with the SVPs that run the product lines. But I think it's really important to get him out there. And Matt Grimm, our other co-founder, who's the COO, he runs the entire operational side of the business. And that is an incredibly hard job. There's no way I would want to do that. But I think having those really clear swim lanes is really important.
You, Trae, do this fascinating job of evenly splitting your time between Anduril and being one of the investing partners at Founders Fund. A much better job than I've done. I've done 3/4 of this on Anduril. But in the time we have left, what is that like for you at being one of the investing partners at Founders Fund, and just straight away in a firm that's preparing to be one of the big beneficiaries of an IPO of SpaceX?
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of different ways that you can approach venture capital. I think for some people, they really want to focus on kind of growth and doing diligence. There's other people that are pure intuition, that are just like, measuring founders to make early stage bets. The kind of strategic slice that I've found that works best for me, given my own personality, is I'm an operator at my core. Like, I'm much more comfortable working at a startup than I am working at an investment firm. But that's actually a really interesting lens into the startup market, because I have exposure every day to what software are we using that works? What are the strategic challenges that we're encountering as it pertains to the rise of AI? These are questions that I'm dealing with on the company level. And so when I have the ability to interact with other startups, I think I have the ability to kind of identify areas where, wow, that would actually be really helpful, or I've seen 3 or 4 other things that approach this in a way that I think is better. So, everyone has their own set of advantages. I feel like doing both in parallel has been a great asset, both to Founders Fund and to Anduril.
Is there a Founders Fund SpaceX thesis that in aggregate across all the investing partners you hold, or is there a Trae thesis that you apply?
We all have very different opinions on every portfolio company. We are a very debate-driven culture. I think SpaceX is kind of a unique encapsulation and a microcosm of the way that Founders Fund works, because we invested very early, like around Flight 2.
2008? Or?
It was way before my time,
okay.
like 6 or 7 years before I joined the fund. And at that time, obviously, it would have been crazy to think about the Starlink as a part of the business. And even when we made the Starlink era bets in SpaceX, it would have been very difficult to imagine how AI would have impacted, data centers in space and all these other things that are going on. And so now, you look at SpaceX and you're thinking like, wow, like what is Elon and the team working on pertaining to like getting humanity to being a Kardashev type 2 civilization? These weren't the questions we were asking when we made the original investment, where it was like, can we get a rocket into space? It's very different companies at that point.
So you have to like refresh in real time.
Constantly,
the thesis refreshes. How much does the venture capital industry need this IPO? I think what's interesting about the Founders Fund investment is not just how early it was, but when it continued, it was across several funds. It's a big moment for the LPs as well. How much are they kind of banking on this and have been waiting on this?
Well, yeah, we have SpaceX investment in almost every fund, both across our venture funds and our growth funds. So there's a ton of exposure for LPs that were with us since the very beginning, and even the ones that joined us very recently. I think the core lesson that everyone has learned from this experience is never bet against Elon. It's just a bad idea. I think getting the opportunity for people to see liquidity that they've been hanging on to for 18 plus years is a tremendous opportunity to see some of those gains and also reinvest those in whatever the next SpaceX is going to be.
Very quickly, the firm has 12 investing partners. Could you just explain how it works with Peter? Peter right now is in Argentina, but does the firm do the classic Monday morning meeting thing? Does he zoom in? Are you constantly, the 12 of you, talking to each other? I think there's still a mystique there about how it actually works.
I'll be honest, there's still a mystique to me. I'm not really sure how it works either. Peter he's an N of one. He's a very interesting personality. His location it's like a point of frequent conversation that I don't really understand, because he's as accessible as he's always been, regardless of where he is. If for anyone that's read his book 0 to 1, you can kind of imagine how that would translate to a venture fund. Monday meetings, for example, we don't do Monday meetings. Why don't we do Monday meetings? It's not because we're lazy. It's because when you create a process, a tracking system for how you move something from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, you end up making relative rather than absolute judgments. So you're like, well, this is the best company I met with this week, so I'm going to bring it to the partnership. And then they say, like, well, this is the most interesting company that we have, as a fund, have seen this month. And so by the time it gets to the end of the process, you're like, well, it's made it this far, maybe we write a small check. And there's just like not a lot of conviction that's built into that. So we have created a ton of friction in the process of getting a deal through because we have no standing meetings. And so if you want an investment to be made, you have to go and wrangle all of the other people that are required to get that deal done. And
you mean internally with each other?
Internally with each other. And any one person can basically torpedo a deal. And so you have to go charging in as hard as you can with really high conviction. And what that means is that we make, as a fund, significantly fewer investments by number, not by dollar amount, than any other venture fund of our size. But we're highly, highly concentrated into the bets in the fund. So, call it 40% of every fund is concentrated in just a couple of companies. And I think that really is because we've created an enormous amount of friction. It's just really hard to get anything done.
Trae Stevens, Founders Fund, Anduril. We never have enough time, but actually, I think you just gave us more insight into the Founders Fund world, but also the industry right now than we've had for some time. Ladies and gentlemen, Trae Stevens, thank you very much.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
Please welcome to the stage Yoshua Bengio, founder and scientific advisor at Mila Quebec AI Institute and co-president and scientific director at Law Zero, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Shireen Ghaffari.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Pleasure.
Professor Bengio, you are a godfather of AI.
So they say.
One of the OGs in this field, if you will. You could have gone to work for probably any of the many AI labs right now and received millions, maybe more, in compensation for it. Why have you never gone to a major AI company?
Actually, a number of reasons. I feel like as a university professor, I make a decent living. It's not a crucial thing for me. What has been crucial for me is working for a mission that I felt good about, and I was able to do that in academia. Now I created this nonprofit, Law Zero, which is focused on something really important to me and maybe for the future of our societies, which is AI safety. How do we build AI that will not harm people? And it isn't something that, in my opinion, that gets enough attention in industry.
What are the most worrying emergent behaviors that you're seeing today in AI?
Many, but I can summarize many of them under this rubric that we are not succeeding in making sure that AI will behave in a way that doesn't violate our red lines or our safety instructions. So it shows up right now with Mythos, for example, where it's quite easy for somebody to use the AI to launch an attack, a cyber attack, even though the AI is being instructed not to help for this kind of thing. But it's true for other misuses of AI. It shows in what's called sycophancy, where the AI's in spite of the instructions, are doing a little bit too much to approve your thoughts, your emotions, and potentially bring you in a dangerous place, which has given rise to self-harm, for example. It means that these systems somehow are willing to lie, which they shouldn't, in order to make you feel good, for example. And it shows up in places where I think really matter for the business development of AI with agents that sometimes go against our instructions in a way that can be really dangerous for our software infrastructure, our databases, as we've seen some examples of that. And finally, it shows up in these behaviors that are really concerning and scary, as far as I'm concerned, where the AIs choose to go against our instructions, like lying, cheating, hacking in ways that they're not supposed to, in order to preserve themselves, to make sure they're not being shut down, and more recently, to preserve other AIs, which is weird, but this has been observed across many of the leading models. So we're building systems that seem to have their own goals that we don't fully control, and they're getting smarter and smarter. I think we should be concerned.
Do you think Mythos was a genuine turning point for industry? And why do you think people who were maybe even skeptical before about the need for regulation in AI, that it could hinder industry, why do you think Mythos should change their mind?
So many in industry have been broadcasting this view, which clearly was false, as shown by Mythos, that AIs would never be like powerful enough to be a danger to society, for example, in the hands of third parties wanting to use AI for like really attacking our infrastructure, for example. And that meant, well, if AI is just like another technology, ordinary technology, well, you know, we can just let companies regulate themselves. But what Mythos is showing is that, well, we reached a point, and it's going to get worse, where AI can be weaponized. And as such, it becomes a national security issue. And in fact, a global security issue, because you know, an AI could be developed in one country, and then in the second country, somebody uses it to launch an attack on a third country. So it also raises international coordination questions, which may, you know, is probably, you know, related to the fact that there were discussions between the US and China and the last visit of Trump in China. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, if we think of the Mythos event as a one-off, we are wrong. Like, if you look at, for example, the cyber capabilities, we could see it coming. Like, if you look over the last year on benchmarks, they've been like stronger and stronger. It's going to continue. And in 6 to 12 months, probably the Chinese models will be at the same place. And then you have to think it's not just cyber, right? So knowledge gives power. And that power could be misused, or we could lose control of it. So we need to make sure that power is under check. And we can't rely on every company doing the right thing. We need governments to make sure everyone evaluates the risks and then acts accordingly.
The Pope recently issued an encyclical on AI. I understand that you have also been involved in some conversations around what role maybe religious leaders have to play in this discussion about AI safety. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Yes. I was in the Vatican last fall, and the Vatican has been consulting a number of experts on AI because, for the same reason I was talking about, intelligence gives power, and that the power of AI is growing. That means AI is potentially going to transform our societies. But there are many possible futures with that power. And who chooses towards what goals becomes a moral question. And it becomes a democratic question. What do we want? Who decides? Who is going to benefit and who is going to lose? Like, if you think about, the Pope is very much concerned about the jobs issue, but also how AI is transforming who we are, how our children interact with technology, how it changes their minds, our minds, how we interact with each other as human beings. And I'm really delighted that he's chosen to put humans at the center of these discussions, like human dignity. And that is how we should think of steering the technology in a direction that's good for humans. Because we could go in bad places. The good news is we have agency. Humans, societies can choose. It doesn't have to be just the forces of competition. We can put guardrails, and that's what he's telling us.
So let's talk about those guardrails, and technically, which you're working on with your startup Law Zero, and on a far smaller budget, right, than some of the major AI labs out there. But what do you find most promising right now? How confident are you that you're going to be able to develop an AI that is significantly more safe than what we have today?
I am very confident for the following reason. For the first time, I think, in the history of AI based on machine learning, we have mathematical results that can give us guarantees about the good behavior of AI in the sense of not violating the red lines that we have specified. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, no, that's impossible. Like you can't prove anything about these neural nets. They're too complicated. They're messy. They don't do what you train them for. It's just in their nature. But it turns out there is a mathematical trick to actually give guarantees, and it requires a different way of training those AIs, and that's exactly what we're doing. So what we're hoping is to build prototypes of this methodology, which is still using the same toolbox of machine learning and stochastic gradient descent and everything, but trained differently so that we can get these guarantees. And we hope we can do this fast enough. It's going to take enough people, enough compute, so that the leading for-profit companies can get inspired, let's say, by this kind of work, so that we can all benefit from a safer environment as we're deploying AI more and more in society. People and businesses using AI want systems that will be reliable, not that will be flaky and sometimes act according to goals that they didn't decide and that could go against the instructions, like the business rules, for example, of a company.
Have you talked to any of the other AI companies about potentially using these tools that you're building?
Yes, of course, and they would like to see us building these kinds of things, and we will keep them abreast of what we're doing. I've been giving talks at the leading companies in the last year or two, and I was here in California precisely for this reason. So yeah, we need also ideally more effort. So you have to understand the problem of how to build AI that will be both capable and safe is a real scientific challenge that for now nobody really knows how to deal with. And I have my take on it. I'm very confident that it will work. But ideally, we have 10 of these kinds of things. And so we need to encourage more research to explore ways to build AI that will be behaving ethically and will be useful, right?
So last year I had the chance to interview one of your fellow godfathers of AI, who, like you, was critical in the scientific discoveries that have led us to this moment of neural network innovation, transformer models, Geoff Hinton. And Geoff Hinton told me that he had just come upon a new concept that he thinks is key to unlocking safer AI, and he called it Mother AI, right. And that we should train AI to act more maternal, because then it will have our best interests in mind. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Would you characterize the AI you're building that way, that it has a maternal instinct, or what you think of?
Well, currently, obviously not. And I like Jeff's idea. What is not clear is how do you actually get to an AI that would be not just like a mother, but a good mother.
That's important.
Right. So the path I've chosen is a bit different. The scientist AI, the project that we're working on, isn't actually aiming to make the AI have particular values or like moral system. Instead, it's based on building an AI that will be completely honest and humble about what it knows and doesn't know. Because once you have something like this, you can ask questions about particular preferences that you or I or a particular company or government has about what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. Because if you build an AI that embodies a particular set of moral values, well, maybe different people have different views of what is good and bad, and different countries and so on. And the preferences in different companies could also be different. So that's one reason why it would be better if it is something we can do at runtime to ask, is this action going to violate these instructions? And also, honesty is super important. Like, I wouldn't want an AI that decides to lie to me for my good sake according to the AI. I'd like a future where humans remain in charge, especially about moral choices and societal choices. And we have a tool for this. It's called democracy.
Speaking of democracy, there is obviously a very big race between Western powers, especially the US and China right now on AI. You've worked with the UN on AI safety. Do you think that there is hope for international cooperation on AI safety standards, especially with countries like China?
We have no choice. Let's go back to mythos. So as far as American infrastructure is concerned, the issue isn't just that American companies could deploy something that is used by, say, Iran or Russia against American banks and American energy grid and so on. The issue is that it could also be Chinese models used by these countries or crazy people or terrorists against us. So somehow, the US has to sit down with China. And of course, China feels the same. In fact, they feel even more because the leading models right now are in the US. So both have an interest to sit down at the table and agree, okay, our companies should evaluate those risks that are currently prominent, like cyber for now, eventually more things like bioweapons, and not deploy in one form or another AIs that would allow these really dangerous uses. And then eventually it's going to be more than China and the US because other countries are also in the business of building AI systems. So I think there's like no choice. It's like the analogy here would be nuclear weapons. If the other guys are building nuclear weapons, we have to sit down with them to make sure they handle them in a safe way and it doesn't end up killing billions of people. So that's going to come, I think. And now the question really isn't whether it's needed or it's going to come, is are we going to be wise enough to foresee this and start, because it takes time to negotiate. I mean, look at how much time it took for nuclear weapons. From 1945 to the early 60s, it's almost 20 years. So AI is moving very fast, and so we need this to happen faster. So let's hope we end up with wise and compassionate leaders in the countries that matter here, so that we end up in a good place.
We talked about when you were first starting research on neural networks and how it was not at all popular at the time. It was not at all clear that would be the path to unlock much more sophisticated artificial intelligence. Now you have the companies building on neural networks as some of the most valuable companies in the world, 3 AI companies potentially going public in the months to come. Do you think it's possible for these companies, which all say they want to share the same values as you around safety and honesty in the tools they build, do you think it's possible for them to do that as they become some of the most powerful and valuable companies in the world?
Well, it is technically possible. The question is, what is the incentive structure? And right now, if you look at how much is invested, and mostly in industry because that's where the money is, in designing AI in a way that will respect our wishes and not be used as a weapon, there isn't much in comparison to how much is invested to make the AIs more capable. Now, more capable sounds good. Like we want smarter tools that do a better job. But more capable is a dual, there's another side of the coin. It means they're more capable to do bad things. So we need to advance on that safety front. And yeah, maybe things will change. Maybe the pressure from governments, the pressure from the public, or maybe insurers will mean that the companies will start investing much more in safety. And by the way, in academia, also I feel like there's not enough work because, like, I look at my grad students, they want to be hired by the big companies, and so they work on the popular topics. But it could change if the forces at play and things like Mythos could really change that. So we realize we need to take this safety issue much more seriously.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Professor Bengio.
Please welcome to the stage Dan Schulman, CEO at Verizon, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Tom Giles.
Dan, thanks for joining us. It's always great to have the CEO of a company that you've been a customer of for like most of my adult life. So all my grievances, I'm just going to bring them to the table here. In all seriousness, you've been CEO of Verizon since October. Something of a homecoming for you, having grown up at AT&T, getting Virgin Mobile off the ground. When it comes to running a wireless company, and you had that long interlude in the middle at PayPal, so we'll talk about that later, but what do the old rules no longer apply?
Well, I think we live in a time right now of change I've really never seen before. The pace of change is dramatic. I say inside the company right now, anytime the pace of change outside is greater than the pace of change inside, we're falling behind, and that's a really high bar to get over. I think there's some similarities and some differences. I mean, way back when I was at AT&T, we were a big bureaucratic company. Verizon is a big bureaucratic company. It loves its processes. It loves to show its work. But like, I'm about outcome and how fast can we move the company forward. We're very risk averse. And I get that. Like, there should be places where we are risk averse when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to the integrity of our financial numbers. Like, my tolerance for risk is like a 1. But for the most part, my tolerance for risk, for trying things and failing fast and then learning from it and moving forward, is like an 8 or a 9. And I think in general, the company is probably at a 2 to 3. We're very hierarchical. I need to be very careful what I say, because it's taken as gospel. And the truth of the matter is, things are changing so fast. Like, I'm always learning. I can't predict the future. I can try and do my best to ascertain like the direction of it, but I'll frequently be wrong on that as well.
It's still less than a year that you've been there, but how do you get from that? You said around 2 in those areas where you want to see people take more risks. How do you get closer to that 8, 9 level of tolerance?
Well, I think you, or I don't know if you would, but I think leadership is like 3 things in my view. The first is to clearly define reality. And nobody really wants to hear that, to tell you the honest. Certainly my first coming on stage in front of all the employees of Verizon, I had no slides, nothing on screen, no talk track, just kind of like what I saw. And what I saw was a company that was losing. in the market. We had lost market share for 5 straight years. We had gone from being number 1 in market cap to being last. Our forward PE was last in the market and terrible. And so, you know, I kind of laid that out for everybody. And I think we had just gotten used to gently ceding market share as opposed to playing to win. And that just doesn't work for me. I mean, that's just not who I am. You know, when I first came in, I think people were scared because I said that, you know, we wanted to play to win. We wanted to stop losing market share and start gaining market share. And people were worried that was going to lead to, you know, a price war. But that's not the way that you compete. Like, anybody can compete on price. Price is easy. It's about competing on other parts of the value proposition where you can actually differentiate yourself and create lasting value. Like if somebody puts a promotion out there, like I can match it now in 2 hours. So there's no competitive advantage to that. So I think it's really about laying out the reality of where you are, and people don't want to be part of a losing team. And then the second thing a leader needs to do is inspire. Lay out a vision of what you want to do. How are you going to reclaim your market leadership? And then clearly lay out the path between reality and that vision, and like how are we going to get there and over what time frame, and what things are we going to chew off first and start to work on. So it is going probably faster than I imagined. I'm proud of the team. I don't like giving out compliments that easily, but I am proud of where they are. There's a lot more work to do.
So you've given hints on some of that work that you want to do, moving away from low margin, highly promotional activity, simplify promotions, simplify plans. Put some more flesh on those bones for us. What does that look like?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the reason people leave Verizon is one, when we price up with no incremental value. And we had done that for 3 years in a row. We had done something like 30 price ups with no incremental value. And that obviously distresses customers. And so we had started to see our churn go up. Yep. And I told the company that, like, the first rule of getting out of a hole is stop digging. And so we're just not going to raise prices without any corresponding value. And I'm beginning to see that as our churn starts to come down. Yeah. The second is friction in the process. When you come into our store, how quickly can we help you? When we sell you something, is that reflected on your first bill? When you call into customer service, do you get somebody who's empathetic? Do what they see match with what you heard in the store and on your bill? And that's really, really difficult. That's the end-to-end customer experience. Okay. And that's hundreds, if not thousands, of things that you need to do better. And we are focused on every single one of those, just incrementally getting better, because I feel if we can have the best end-to-end customer experience, that's real differentiation, because it's very hard to imitate, and it's extremely hard to do, but extremely appreciated by customers.
It's going to be hard for me as a customer who's been with Verizon for a very long time to notice even many incremental things. I might understand, okay, yeah, I do have a better customer experience, but there's something concrete that I should look forward to keep me from, taking that offer from T-Mobile or whatever.
Yeah, there will be.
Can you give us a little bit more of an indication?
No.
I want to be conscious of our...
No, but to your point, I mean, the answer still is no, I won't. But I think that when we talk about kind of this end-to-end value proposition, there are little things, there are bigger things, there's how do you simplify things, how do you add elements of loyalty into what you're trying to go do. And so, my view is there's never a big bang in what you're going to do in front of customers, because if you can do a big bang, then your competitors can do a big bang. Right. It's unfortunately, it is like having a long-term plan, and as I say inside the company, every single day matters. Like, I want to see incremental improvement every single day. And so learning to use the tools of our time, whether that be AI in how we serve customers much better, whether it be specific offers we put in front of you, elements of the value proposition. So when you see things, expect that there will be other things a month from now, the next month, the month after, because it's got to be a steady drumbeat of improvements.
When it comes to encouraging your staff to use AI tools, what's your stance on that? And specifically, I think early on, a lot of businesses were saying, hey, get out there, use as much as you want, create things, create chatbots, build agents. Have you had to become more disciplined about that? And what are your marching orders when it comes to using AI tools to make either the workplace or the customer experience better?
Well, I'm pretty outspoken on AI, as some of you may know. And I think as leaders of companies, I think we have a responsibility to talk about what could happen as a result of implementing AI. Yeah. It's clear to me that whatever we have right now, these are the worst models that we will ever have in our lifetime. Because
don't tell Daniela that.
Yeah, she knows it. Like, she'd be the first to say it,
I get your point.
Yeah, OpenAI is going to release 4 new models between now and the end of the year. Each one of them will be a step function improvement from where they are today. And so it's clear to me that AI will do at least 3 things inside the company. It will dramatically improve our productivity levels. It will dramatically improve our ability to satisfy customers. In the last 3 months, we've been experimenting with agents that are replacing some of our customer service reps. And those agents, their customer satisfaction rate is 1,280 basis points better than what we had before. Think about that. If it was 50 basis points, that'd be a big improvement. So our ability to satisfy customers, our ability to ingest all of the data around you, like, you may think of yourself as one customer. We think of you as kind of like the sum total of what lines are under your account. Do your kids on your account? Where do they call? How do you use it? Do you have a Nest associated with your broadband service? And so we need to see all of that to be able to satisfy you. And then finally, AI is going to radically redefine our value proposition. I mean, my view of this is that we have an initiative inside the company called Every Customer Has a Name. And that means every customer is individual. How we respond to you should be empathetic, but every part of our value proposition should be tailored to the 300 plus different ways that we can look at you and tailor a proposition to you.
To what extent does AI just completely replace, if they're so much better, to what extent does AI replace human customer service agents completely?
For sure, you're going to see disruption with AI in certain job functions. I don't see how that's not possible. And I don't see how anybody can look people in the eye and say that's not possible.
What percentage of customer service gets displaced?
it can be a large percentage of customer service. I think that function, is a function that has a lot of rote parts of it. I forgot my password. What's my billing amount? Those are all simple and easy things for an agent to go do. More complex things will be a combination of human and machines working together to satisfy. What that doesn't mean, like, you will have functions that will be disrupted for sure. And I don't see how anyone, again, could say that they won't be. But you will have, like what we're seeing in our customer service right now, is the rote stuff can be done by agents. More complex is a combination of an agent and a human working hand in hand to be able to satisfy that customer much better than either of them could do alone. And so I think you'll see all of those things happen, but I'm going to lean heavy, as I think all of my colleagues will, all the Fortune 100 will lean heavy on AI. You cannot be a part of this age without understanding the technological revolution. It'll be AI. I think personally we get to AGI, like some are saying before this now, but I think in the next 2 to 4 years we're in AGI. I think in the next 4 years we're at quantum. We're already preparing for Q-Day as early as 2 years away because we need to look at all the encryption pieces of this. And then you're at humanoid robotics, a couple of years after that. That's all happening, and we need to be ready as a society, as leaders of corporations, and then we need to take the responsibility of that. So for instance, I think I was one of the first to pull together a pretty wide scale. We put aside $20 million to train and reskill people that are impacted by AI.
Right.
That's the tip of the iceberg for what we're going to go do. Like my view is we have a responsibility to put serious money, resource, and effort into training not just our employees, not just people that are impacted, but the communities we serve as well, in utilizing AI in a responsible way. But as I say to everybody inside the company, you should not be scared of AI. You need to learn AI. You need to be able to use it in your work. You need to be able to use it in your personal life, because that's the age we live in.
One of the first moves you made was a difficult move, admittedly, in eliminating a lot of jobs at Verizon to the tune of 13,000. You set up this fund, 20 million. You said that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. What are some of the early takeaways from that, and what do companies need to do to reskill workers who are affected by, whether they're in customer service or some other area that's affected by AI?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're training everybody inside the corporation. We do week-long events now, and that can be from some people don't even know, the right prompts to go use and how to use basic chatbots, to being able to gin up agents. We have a whole AI tech stack that we are now implementing, most of which will be done next month in July, all of it finished by November. But you have to move quickly, you have to train. We have 7,000 people in this reskilling that have already applied for that. But as I mentioned, I think our responsibility is to work with government. I'm spending a lot of time down in DC to think about how we take our resources, maybe the resources of the Fortune 500 as well. Think about it, if we're putting 50 to 100 million into it, and you multiply that by, my peer set, and then what the government can do, you could have a lot of money going into thinking about reskilling, retraining, and how to really utilize AI as hopefully a force that can unleash the best parts of humanity, as opposed to a force that, could add a lot of stress into our democracy.
Speaking of powerful tools, briefly, in our last few seconds, I'd like
We're out of time,
You
actually.
recently joined, they don't need to know that. Recently joined Project
000.
Project Glasswing. Given your background in cybersecurity, give us a sense of now that you've had a chance to get in there and test it. How powerful is it? What does it do? Should we be afraid of it?
Well, you should always be concerned about cybersecurity. I mean, it is existential. Everything we do is controlled by software. You know, the elevators you go in, the planes that you board, your financials, everything. I don't know how much money you have in your pocket right now, but it's probably not a lot, and all of your wealth is digital in some way. So I think, a consumer has their identity stolen every 2 seconds. So I think cyber is existential for us. Mythos, which we've been working with as part of Glasswing, is a tool that can identify a lot of elements that might not have been seen as critical, but when you link them together, they become a critical infrastructure thing that needs to be repaired. Mythos is very powerful. It's enabling us to identify vulnerabilities, but also fix them quite quickly as well. But it's also forcing us to think about, how we ingest third-party vendors into our network and how we, everything needs to be patchable remotely. Like within the next couple of months, 85% of everything done in our network, instead of taking multiple hours or days to figure out what's going on, we will identify it in minutes, go right to the element and fix it autonomously.
Lightning round. If the government continues to designate Anthropic a national security threat, given its concerns about how its tools are used in defense, how problematic is that for you as a company?
We have access to it. So I would say Mythos had a head start, but all of these models catch up very quickly. I think OpenAI's model around cyber is extremely powerful as well. And as I mentioned, every 2 to 4 months, these models double in strength and capacity. So I think Mythos was a real good look at what the capabilities of these models can do in specific functional areas. And I'm glad because we do a lot for the critical infrastructure of the United States, and Mythos is going to help us protect it.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome to the stage Samir Samat, President of the Android ecosystem at Google, for conversation with Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. Please welcome to the stage.
Okay, Samir, welcome. Hi. So, President of Android, senior guy at Google. You may have heard of a company called Apple nearby your headquarters. So next week they're going to attempt to fix Siri, finally after 15 years, by changing, sort of opening the hood and taking your stuff, Gemini, and just jamming it in there. What do you think of Apple using your technology to power their AI?
It's a hell of a way to start, Mark. Hello, it's nice to be here. Nice to see all of you. Actually, as Mark said, I run Android at Google, the Android ecosystem. So to be honest, I'm the last one at Google to know what Apple is going to do with anything Google. In fact, most of what I know about it comes from your reporting, to be honest. But look, I think that every company is working on their next iteration of what their intelligence will be. I think we've been at it for a while with Android. We recently announced Gemini Intelligence, but before that, we've had Gemini on Android devices since 2024, and we've been scaling it now to TVs and watches and cars, and the reaction's been awesome. There are hundreds of millions of Gemini users every day on Android, and I think it's going quite well.
You know, I just noticed you're wearing the Fitbit Air, Steph Curry edition. I'm actually wearing one too. And if you guys aren't familiar, this is not an ad, this is part of the question. This thing is awesome. It's like this new screenless fitness tracker, $100. It's like a Whoop, but made by Google.
Yeah.
But it's a screenless device.
Yeah.
And one day, I mean, could this become like an ambient AI device with a microphone? Do you think devices are going to evolve pretty quickly into this sort of screenless type of environment?
Yeah, I think devices are evolving pretty quickly already. You know, I don't know about ambient recording and what have you. I think there's, you know, a lot of privacy concerns and things like that with that. But I do think, you know, screens are, it's obviously very important still. I mean, one of the things that people get wrong, I think, about this new sort of agentic era of AI is that, you know, there's going to be an app apocalypse, as you know, some people are, sometimes I refer to it, where all the apps go away and there's no screens and you just kind of say things. I definitely think apps of certain kind will change, you know, but at the same time, if you really look at the data, 70% of the time plus on our phones, what are we doing? Well, we're watching YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or chatting with friends or playing games or these kinds of things. So these are experiences, and I think those remain. I think a screen in your life to do those things will be important. I think there's expansionary opportunities. You know, I think you know, fitness bands is one area. There are many other devices people are experimenting with. As we've announced, we're working on a pair of glasses. You know, I've been using the Warby Parker version of the glasses. I got a talking to about showing them publicly, so I'll put them back in.
And I'll have more questions about that.
I'll put them back in my jacket pocket for now. But you know, I think these are important devices to be working with because, especially with AI, it opens up a number of new capabilities, and we're super excited about all of that.
So the big thing, and if some people here aren't familiar, is Google announced a few weeks ago that you're moving from this classic operating system to what you call an intelligence system, and basically recreating Android for the AI era. What does that look like? Like starting in the fall when this thing is rolling out more widely, and next year to more devices, what is a phone user's day going to look like versus how it looks today? Because today you download apps, you go to your home screen, you launch apps, you move to your browser, you move to your TikTok, whatever. What is using a phone going to feel like in 6 months from now?
I think it's going to be a hybrid of that and some new capabilities. So the way I think about it and the way we talk about it is we have an operating system, and we're moving from an operating system to an intelligence system. What does that mean? I think if you look at the last 40 years of computing, it's primarily been set up to make the user the micromanager of the system. Okay, so you are literally conceiving of what you're trying to get done. You are then converting that in your head to clicks and taps and various other things that you need to get done. You know, menus are just organized things you can click or tap on, you know, and you are essentially micromanaging these machines, which is fine and has worked for us pretty well. But with this new capability, with this new technology, the opportunity is to really rebuild things from the ground up to focus more on capturing what is your intention. What is your goal? What is that goal in your mind that you're converting into all these taps and swipes and what have you? And then get that done for you in a much more seamless and automated way. And so, you know, I gave this example recently where I was planning a barbecue, and I have a list of, as one does, make a list of who's coming and whether they're vegetarian or not, and how many people are they bringing in their party. And then I asked Gemini to look at the list and go to my favorite grocery shopping app, which happens to be Instacart, and add what I will need for this barbecue to my cart. You know, and that is more capturing my intention. What am I doing? What am I trying to do? And then taking the steps for me. And that's what we mean by this transition to an intelligence system.
When is this going to be real? Like, obviously I've played with it, I see it, but when is the mass consumer going to start being able to experience this?
Well, we released a preview of this already on of task automation, of app automation, already on Samsung Galaxy S26 devices and Pixel devices. We will do even more this summer. And you know, we have a number of capabilities we just announced at Google I/O in the last couple of weeks that are rolling out over the summer. Can I tell you one of my favorites that's coming?
If you want.
Okay,
sure.
yeah. So one of my favorites is
I've got nowhere to be.
Yeah, you've got nowhere to be. One of my favorites is redoing input. So like the keyboard hasn't really fundamentally changed in a very, very long time. The keyboard is the perfect encapsulation of micromanagement. Like literally you think of how to say something, what you want to say, how to say it, pick the words, and then tap the specific thing. You know, it's like really, you're doing a lot of work there, you know? And you know, the last thing we all added to the keyboard that was kind of profound improvement was swipe or autocomplete, which is like so 2010, you know? And so I feel what we're doing now is we have this feature coming to the keyboard called Rambler.
The best name.
Named by some of our engineering team, as we do at Google sometimes. And Rambler is a simple concept. It's when you hold down this new microphone button, instead of doing dictation, where you get all the ums and the ahs and it faithfully records everything you're saying, you do a brain dump of what you're trying to convey. And then it will figure out, in your own tone of voice with some authenticity, how to frame what you're really trying to say in a nice way that you would actually text somebody, right? And I've been using it, and it's awesome. We get hundreds of millions of uses of the microphone on the keyboard every day. And my kids, this is like the only way that they type, is to use the microphone. So I think it's going to be a big change. I'm super excited about it. That's a very practical way you make a system much more intelligent.
I'm not going to ask you if the phone is going away, because I think we both agree it's not going away. But in 5 years from now, what is sort of the advanced consumer tech user, smartphone user? What is their tech setup? What are they leaving the house with? What does that look like?
That's a great question. I do think the phone with a different interface will continue for all the reasons that we talked about. You know, I am a big wearables person, as you can probably tell. I'm wearing a lot of wearables. Yeah, you're doing a good job.
3 of them.
I do think the exciting thing about AI with wearables is less about form factor, honestly, and is more about how we take the data and actually start to really provide more useful insights. That's the real breakthrough, in my opinion, around this. And so I do think there will be more people who have a wearable of some kind on for health reasons. I think that will be a big deal. And I think some people will add you know, a pair of glasses as well. I don't know that they'll be for everybody, because not everybody likes the form factor of glasses, but I think what will convince a number of folks is when you have the ability to have something like Gemini or another AI agent of your choice, being able to, with your permission, see the world the way you see it, you know, and give you help in that moment can be pretty useful. You know, like look at a set of IKEA instructions and then turn and look at all the pieces on the ground and say, okay, how do I do this? You know, like that's pretty useful. So I think that will be a lot of people's setup.
So the smart glasses you have in your pocket, the smart glasses we're going to see over the next few years, obviously those are display free, and you're relying on the cameras and voice input and voice speakers and whatnot for AI. When do you think you're going to see serious implementations of AR and displays? Like how far away are we from that? Because when you previewed Google XR, those are one of the things you talked about, but that seems pretty out there.
I'd say there's a spectrum of technology, right, in the AR and the VR space. You know, when you think about the VR side of the spectrum, you have heavy headsets that we all know today that you kind of wear, and maybe you can tolerate them for some small period of time. I think those are changing rapidly, becoming much lighter weight. There's a project I would have you all take a look at from a company called XReal, and they've talked about it publicly. It's called Aura, A-U-R-A. And it's basically a pair of what look like sunglasses. They're not glasses you'd wear out and about. It's more taking the headset technology and reducing it down to the form factor of something that you could wear comfortably all day. I think the VR space will advance with that. I think for out and about, the first step is audio glasses, where you know you'll hear. You have a microphone or speakers that fire directly into your ears. No one else around you can hear what's going on, but you can ask for help, or you can get assistance from your AI agent. And then next year, I think you'll start to see much more prevalence of glasses with a small display in them. And that's great for walking navigation or showing you the recent message that you received, or you know, various different glanceable style pieces of information. And it will continue to advance from there.
What do you think that market's going to look like in terms of the key players? Like right now, obviously, for phones, well, let's take a step back. Computers was Mac OS and Windows, the two big ones. Then you had the phone evolution. It's Android and iOS. What is the pie going to look like when it comes to XR? Do you think it's going to be Apple and Google? How big do you think Meta is going to be part of that? Who are the big winners?
It's too early to tell. I think it's very first inning. I think everyone is investing and building new experiences. I think that the new part of this puzzle, though, that's also going to be very exciting is, this is a consumer electronic device, but it's also fashion. Like you need to want to wear it first and foremost. It can't be something that you look at and say, okay, well, I really don't want that on my face. And so there are eyewear companies that we're partnered with. For example, Warby Parker, Gentle Monster, and that's really important. So that design element of it, I think, is a difference from traditional tech. And so I think the pie might look very different than what we're used to in the tech space.
Okay, another phone category or another device category, foldable phones. I know you use one. Yeah. I think that market's going to just explode, especially with Apple getting into it. What are the advantages you're seeing with foldable phones, and do you agree? Do you think more Android phone makers are going to move in this direction, and is it going to win out?
I think almost every major Android manufacturer that builds a premium smartphone device now has a foldable in their lineup. I use a foldable as my primary work device. As you know, we've talked about this before. I'm rocking usually like 6 different phones at a time, but that's because I have a weird job, which makes me do that. But if you really ask me, like, which one would I use for work? And I know a lot of folks in the audience have busy jobs. Like, I would strongly recommend trying out a foldable. The Samsung Fold 7 or the Pixel Fold are two that you can grab. These are productivity beasts. For video conference, for looking at slideshows, for doing anything. I use my laptop at work, I'd say 50% less, with a foldable device, and it's great if you're on the go. So I'm a believer. I'm a big believer, and we've been working on the multitasking capabilities with the Fold for a long time, and the category is growing already very rapidly.
Speaking of laptops, you're getting back into laptops in a huge way. Chrome OS, Android coming together, this string of Android laptops. You've seen a lot of different companies now. Dell just launched a cheaper laptop. Apple obviously just launched a cheaper laptop. Why are we getting back into laptops? Why are they sort of having a resurgence? Is it because of AI, more powerful chips? What's going on?
I think there's a number of reasons. The laptop form factor, and this is an interesting evolution, right? Like we always think that the new form factor will kill the old form factor. And actually, I think what tends to happen is we're still in this period of tech where it's expansionary, and you see that actually laptops continue to grow despite mobile, and I think even with new AI devices, all the previous will continue to grow as well. Laptops are very interesting, especially with AI. Your ability to use that real estate now and get far more done is important. We announced something called the Google Book, which is a combination of everything we've learned from Chrome OS and the Android operating system together. And the Google Books will be made by many different manufacturers, HP, Lenovo, Dell. There's many that have already announced that they're building this. They will come out in the fall. And we think it is a real opportunity to bring innovation back to the laptop from the standpoint of what you can do with AI, especially with the agentic capabilities. We had one example that we demoed, which was to actually make the cursor, the mouse cursor, a part of that agentic experience, where I don't know if any of you have had this situation where you wanted to show how you would redecorate a room, and you have like 7 different browser tabs, and you have 7 different pictures and 7 different browser tabs open. You want to put it in your chatbot of choice, and you want to ask it to like imagine this room for you. What do you have to do? You have to go download every photo, and you have to go upload every photo, And so what if the cursor, with a quick wiggle of the cursor, could just become that selection tool, and you just click on any photo or circle something or whatever, and it all becomes context for the next query you're going to ask. These are simple things when you see them, but actually they make a huge difference for lowering the friction to bring context into these systems that depend on that to give you amazing answers. And that is what an intelligence system and the future of operating systems should be, is lowering that friction.
So just taking a step back here, final question. I think you have probably the coolest job in tech because you are the chief decision maker and chief of all operating system, or the operating system powering much of the world's devices, the phones, computers, glasses, everything now. Big responsibility. But I'm sure, at least I'm curious, a lot of people are curious, what does your day look like? Like, what do you do all day? How do you? I don't mean it like that, but
what do you do
but
all
like,
day?
What is the 18 to 16 hours a day for you look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just like many of you, many folks here, you have super busy jobs, and I think one of the challenges is we have context switches, right? As you get maybe in a different position in an organization, you're, one minute you're talking about some. For me, it's how are we going to change memory management in the operating system, which has profound implications for everything. Next, I'm meeting with a regulator. Next, I'm talking about our P&L with our CFO. It's a lot of context shifts. I would say the biggest thing that I've learned about this and how I try to structure my day is that if I just respond to the inbound, I will go over an entire quarter and I will look back and say, okay, I was furiously active, but I don't know that I made a lot of progress. So I do something every quarter called a calendar cleanse, which basically means I make a list of the things that are most important that I spend my time on, which is subtly different, by the way, from the things that are most important in the organization. Some of the things that are most important in the organization don't necessarily require my time, but I make a list of the things that I need to spend my time on. And then the typical approach I used to take is you go to your calendar and you're like, I will find space for these things. Okay, this does not work, at least not for me. I work with my administrative business partner who's here somewhere, Sonia, who hates this process, by the way, and we delete the entire calendar. We just delete it. And we rebuild it with the things that I need to spend my time on. And then whatever's left at the end, whatever spare time we have, that we use for the inbound. And so that's like, my day is, I try to be very intentful and very purposeful about how to spend time, because otherwise we just don't move the ball down the field.
I was just thinking, you might be the one guy that AI has made your life busier, right? Because you're developing the tools to save everyone else time with AI, but that clearly makes you more busy because you have a lot more to develop now, right?
I think it's an interesting thing. People who really lean into AI a lot, I've heard they actually feel more busy than ever, which is an interesting thing I think we need to look at more, right? It's like, is it because you're getting more done? Is it because, what is it about it? But I think there's something about that.
Well, for next year's conference. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
HPE engineers trust into the fabric of your enterprise protection. With SD-WAN, Secure Service Edge, and Zero Trust Access woven into one unified architecture, HPE brings networks and security together, ensuring every device and application is protected from edge to cloud. All with private clouds and sovereign AI factory environments to keep your sensitive data and models under your control. Build resilience into your DNA with HPE.
Hi everyone. I'm Kate Moriarty, Deputy Editor of Bloomberg Media Studios, and I'm joined by David Hughes, the Security Leader for HPE's networking business. And we're here today to discuss the new level of resiliency that's required in this evolving time of cybersecurity, and what it really takes to get there. And David, we hear a lot about how AI is transforming how businesses operate, but you're seeing it change how attacks are happening as well. And I'm curious to see what that looks like on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is changing the threat landscape. So, first of all, agentic AI is letting adversaries kind of automate at industrial scale. So much like you could use vibe coding to create an app, the threat actors can use vibe coding to create an attack campaign. In the past, a lot of these things required specialized human expertise, and so the breadth and speed with which adversaries could move was kind of limited by those human resources. But with agentic, if you want to go faster, you want to go broader, you just spin up more agents in parallel, and they work 24/7. So this is, really driving a lot more threats across the landscape. People are moving faster. It's a different environment out there.
Definitely is. And what is HPE doing to help enterprises get ahead of this?
Yeah, coming back to the first question a little bit further, the second thing that we're seeing with AI is it's enabling much more sophisticated phishing campaigns. You can use AI to impersonate people. You can use AI to create much better context around things. And then, lastly, AI is now getting extremely good. You see with Mythos, extremely good at finding vulnerabilities and creating and chaining exploits to take advantage of those vulnerabilities. So, in terms of your question of what we're doing at HPE, first, we're part of Project Glasswing. So we've been very hard at work using frontier models to analyze our code, to find vulnerabilities, and to fix those as fast as we can. The second thing is we have an HPE Threat Labs team. They are working continuously. They're distributed around the globe, monitoring our customers' networks, monitoring various different deception infrastructure that we have to learn what's going on out there in the wild and develop new threat signatures. We also share those with our other cybersecurity partners or competitors via organizations like the Cyber Threat Alliance. Then another thing we're doing is working on ways that we can detect threats, again, using AI, but without signatures, looking at the behavior so that we can find and block threats where there is no signature, when it's still not even a 0 day. It's not a disclosed vulnerability, but from the pattern of behavior, we can tell it's something suspicious and it should be stopped. So those are some of the things, but probably the most important thing that we're doing at HPE Networking is helping security teams use the network as a security tool. And so when you think about the network, it's in the path of everything. When there's a phish happening, when there's a command and control channel feeding information back, when information's being exfiltrated, all those things are going over the network. So the network is a fantastic place to use as a security sensor and also as a cyber security enforcement point.
Really good. And as you're looking ahead, what is HPE's vision for resiliency for enterprises? What does that actually look like? And how do security teams need to think differently in order to get there?
Yeah, so first of all, I think the shift is towards being cyber resilient. So of course, that means deploying all the tools at your disposal, but it also means planning ahead to be ready in terms of how you're going to react and respond to kind of a worst case event. It means implementing things like zero trust principles so that the blast radius of any event is contained and that hopefully you can continue with your business processes, you've got business continuity, even while you may be dealing with a situation in a small pocket of the network. So that's really key. And a big part of what we're doing is helping the security team and networking team align and cooperate together. So often, the network team is really focused on delivering a great experience to users, making sure we've got application uptime, while the cybersecurity team's trying to protect things. And oftentimes, those goals are actually slightly at odds. So what we've been doing is making sure that when we're implementing our kind of self-driving network infrastructure, we're providing a separation in terms of setting policy, which is a security team role, in terms of providing the threat indications, again, to the security team, letting all that happen in parallel while the networking team's doing their day job of delivering a great experience.
Great. Well, it's definitely the right time to be having this conversation and doing the work you're doing. So thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Do you mind being called an ideological lunatic or a bunch of left-wing nut jobs?
I've been called worse things than that.
You think she owns around the place.
23andMe, I think, is so incredibly valuable.
We're coming back. It had that kind of detective story feel to it, you know, when you're hot on the trail of something.
What magazines were you reading as a kid?
I don't think I was reading magazines until I was in them.
Why should people trust you?
I don't think anybody should trust any company or entity completely with any of this.
It's very uncomfortable. Artificial intelligence is this force that is far bigger than we are.
The way I could see AI being banned or blocked is if something really went wrong. And if something really went wrong, then maybe it deserves to be.
Please welcome to the stage Fei Li, co-founder and CEO at World Labs, for conversation with Bloomberg's Emily Chang.
Last time you were here, we talked about how you've come to be known as the godmother of AI. So thank you.
I've aged since then.
Everyone is focused on LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, large language models, but you have raised $1 billion to build something different, large world models. Make the case for us. What is the bet you're making that others aren't?
Right, so this is my co-founded startup, World Labs, and we are all in spatial intelligence. And the means to spatial intelligence is building a large world model. So what is the case for us? The case for us is a 500 million year story, is that animal intelligence starts with seeing and moving in the physical world. That evolution began with us as animals knowing what the world is, knowing who we are, knowing how to move around it, interact with it. And much of life, human work life, human private life, has a lot to do with perceiving, understanding, reasoning, interaction with the world, including imaginary world of creativity, of productivity as virtual worlds. So unlocking that capability in machines, unlocking the capability of generating any 3D, 4D worlds, unlocking the capability of reasoning within any world, unlocking the capability of teaching agents or robots or assisting humans to interact with the world is what spatial intelligence is about. And that's what we are focusing on.
So what can world models do ultimately that LLMs will never be able to?
Can words put down fires? Can words cook an omelet? I think there's so much, right? So we, for example, creativity. People design, whether we're designing interior space, we're designing machines, we're designing homes, we're designing stories. So much of that is beyond words. We also use agents, whether we use agents in virtual world, whether it's for entertainment like gaming, or for more serious industrial applications, whether it's digital twin design or inspection or what kind of many kind of optimization tasks. Or we build robots and to help us to do a lot of things, from putting down fire to helping in healthcare scenarios to manufacturing. All these are downstream applications of unlocking spatial intelligence and building world models.
So what do you think the ChatGPT moment for world models will be? Like, how will we know this has arrived?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily, because chat is such a consumer behavior that ChatGPT moment tends to be used to describe a viral public consumer moment of getting so close to what AI can do. In the world of world models, the kind of spatial intelligence we're trying to unlock I'm still trying to figure out if there is a corresponding consumer moment, because the kind of applications we are talking about tends to be first going to the professionals, professional creators, professional designers, professional developers, professional researchers and engineers who will use it for robotics and industrial design and all that. So maybe we will not necessarily have a consumer moment, but maybe we will. And you know, I would love to design my home in a much easier way and just change the color of the curtain, you know, with a click.
All right, that sounds pretty cool. So in the last 6 months, Jan LeCun left Meta to work on world models. Google shipped Project Genie. NVIDIA has its own world models. Cosmos, NVIDIA is also one of your investors. What do you have that they don't? And which competitors out there worry you the most?
Yeah, so first of all, we started World Labs in 2024. I still remember when we were out talking about world models and spatial intelligence. It was just a year after ChatGPT. People were still totally talking about LLMs. So we really had a head start and understanding that this is going to be the next frontier of AI. I'm very excited by that. So what do they have? We don't. Well, first of all, I think we have an incredible team. We have the conviction.
They don't have the godmother, that's for sure.
But the world is big, and I think this is just like LLMs. I think there will be many companies doing incredible work in world models. Just as 24 hours ago, we kind of got fed up that the word world model has been so confusing and being used in so many different ways that we actually put out a blog just explaining what a functional taxonomy of world model is, instead of mushing everything together. And the way I see it is, right now there are 3 ways of calling world models when it comes to spatial intelligence. One is what I call a renderer, when the model puts beautiful pixels on the screen, mostly like video generation model. And the consumer is mostly human eyeballs. And while the model commits to beautiful pixels on the screen, it doesn't necessarily commit to physics and dynamics and geometric correctness, because that's for just consuming, human eyeball consuming, not necessarily for computation and other tasks. Then another kind of world model is what we call a planner. That is more for machines, more for robots, where it outputs whatever the input is, the state of the world or the action, it outputs a correct action to take to the next step. And you see that kind of world model a lot for robotics applications, and you hear that in that context. The third kind, which I think is the linchpin of the 3, is a simulator, is that it actually is consumed by humans as well as machines, is trying to respect the structure, the physics, and the dynamics of the world, and really simulate the 3D and 4D information of the world, as well as the semantic information. And the simulator could become a renderer. The simulator could become a planner. But this layer is a huge critical path, in my opinion, to unlock spatial intelligence. And that's what World Lab is working on.
All of this rolls up into robotics, so I want to get your take on the field, and humanoids in particular. Funding for humanoids hit $6 billion, but you know, they still can't load my dishwasher as fast as I can. They still can't go get my Amazon packages. Will world models, world labs, close the gap between hype and reality?
That's a loaded question, Emily. First of all,
that is my job.
Yeah, I get it. First of all, robotics is going to be one of the most important revolutions in human industrialization. $6 billion is too small, right? If you look at self-driving cars investment, if you look at language models investment, it took way more than $6 billion. I'm not saying we now. I think it will take time to invest, and it will also hopefully not take the hype, but take the thoughtfulness to invest in the right effort. And for example, unlocking world modeling and spatial intelligence and simulation layer, all this is part of that important effort. Are we going to close the gap? I do believe World Labs is working on one of the most critical technology in spatial physical intelligence, and obviously that's the hope.
You've been more measured on AI safety, skeptical of the doom narrative, but also of heavy-handed regulation. When you look across the industry, where do you see real safety work versus safety theater? Is anyone getting it right?
So in general, I've been just more measured on every rhetoric makes me very boring, to be honest. I think there's just so much hype. There's so much hype. Obviously, we need to build the right technology. We need to guardrail the technology. Whether you use the word responsible, you use the word safety, you use the word trustworthy, building the right technology and product so that it can empower, enhance, augment humanity, and not harm them is the goal of any work we do, whether it's AI or not. So where is it doing right? I really hope every company, every product that's being built, that the people behind it are being mindful of that and are thinking about, what data are we using? What system are we building? What evaluations are we conducting? What guardrails are we putting in? How do we communicate with our users and customers? How do we work with regulators so that when the rubber hits the road, that we are being responsible? I do believe a lot of this work is happening. It's not happening in the theater, to be honest. For example, so many pharmaceutical and healthcare industry companies are incorporating AI. Literally, I just came from the hospital to come to your panel because I have a family member about to get a surgery in the next 1 hour or so. And I was just in Stanford Hospital looking at where AI is already being used and where AI could be used. And it's already happening. Doctors are using AI to help them with charting. Radiologists are using AI to assist them reading the MRI and the CT scans. I do hope that we have more AI to help our nurses, to help family members. I got this long radiology report last night, and the first thing I did is send it to an AI so that it can help me to explain it. So all this is happening. Safety measures are happening, but there needs to be more in the right way, in a scientifically grounded way. And that's the conversation that should be taking place instead of what you say, the theater.
Well, thank you for coming, and I hope your person is okay. We all do. The backlash is real. It's being called the AI hate wave. I'm sure you've seen the video of former Google CEO Eric Schmidt getting booed at a college graduation. You spend a lot of time with students. What are they saying? And if they're scared, are the fears justified?
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time with students. To be fair, my students are pretty privileged because they're Stanford students. I think it's even more important, and I try to do it myself, that we spend time with our teachers, with our nurses, with our parents, grandparents. And that's actually something I try to do. I try to talk to K-12 educators. I try to go to places and talk to people where they feel that they're not part of the conversation. And even Stanford students reflect some of this mixed sentiment. There is anxiety, there is sense of hope, there is also excitement, there is also confusion, there is also simultaneously a sense of dignity and agency when AI can help me do things that I couldn't do before, and a sense of loss of dignity and agency if AI is it going to take my job? So I think the sentiment is mixed, and I really want to point out a lot of this sentiment happens when there is a vacuum of thoughtful public discourse. Right now, the oxygen, the air is all sucked into the polarized extreme of doomerism or total utopian. And when hype takes all the oxygen in the room, that void brews the kind of anxiety. And it's actually that void we really need to care about, because that's where real people live. That's where real people are seeking answers. And I think it's, as a scientist and an educator and an entrepreneur, I'm on ground zero with students, with educators, with entrepreneurs. And I really do believe it's one of my responsibility to not hype and try to speak with both science and humility, and inspire people to recognize this is a technology that can truly empower a lot of our work and life, can truly help us, have a better healthcare system, have better scientific discovery, have better environment, better education, if we do the right thing.
We're both moms. We both have young teenagers. How do you think AI will change learning and the college experience?
AI must change learning. AI must change K to 16 learning. I think this is one of the biggest opportunity for humanity in the next decade to come, is that what the most precious resource of our entire world is human capital. And when we have gotten a technology that can answer standardized tests, whether it's a Common Core kind of test, all the way to International Olympiad math exams, when AI can do better than average human, it's not about humans are bad. It's about we need to change the education system. We need to change how we evaluate. We need to change the way we empower teachers to teach, to educate the next generation of students, where they can use these tools, be empowered, and do things that we can never imagine.
So do you think our kids will still learn?
Absolutely. If we teach them right, if the society prepares them right, they should not be, all of the kids today should not be scared of AI. They should feel the human agency to lead AI, to use AI in the right way, and to use AI to make the right, to make the impact that they want to make for the world.
Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei has suggested AGI is 2 to 3 years out. We'll get there by scaling the current paradigm. Demis Hassabis says we're at the foothills of the singularity. You've said you don't even engage with the term AGI. Are they wrong, or is the disagreement about what we're calling the goal?
I don't engage with the term AGI because the founding fathers of artificial intelligence as a scientific field had this dream of thinking and doing machines. And that is a scientific quest. And that quest has been my lifelong career. And I'm still on that quest. Now I'm combining that scientific quest with making products that can make people's life better. And that is the field called artificial intelligence. And I'm okay, people call it whatever they want. They can call it an apple, that's fine. I'm focusing on building a technology that can truly make a difference in people's lives and work.
What's the one thing you'll have shipped this year that we'll be talking about next year?
I hope that we will be shipping a model for spatial intelligence that will inspire incredibly exciting product opportunities that people haven't seen before.
Dr. and Godmother Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emily.
That was awesome. It's lunchtime. We've got lunch on the 4th floor. Say hi to someone new while you're up there. Make a new connection, please. You can stop by the Corient Lounge to charge your phone and also talk to Corient executives who are here with us today. We've also got some really great lunch sessions on the 4th floor. You can register for those. In the Leadership Lounge, there's a workshop on AI adoption for your business hosted by executive team coach and author Keith Ferrazzi. In the Insight Enclave, our consumer tech editor, Mark Gurman, who is just on stage, he'll be joined by folks from Sonos, Hatch, Aura to talk about the future of consumer tech. You can play around with some of their new gadgets. If you registered for our Innovator Circle discussions, those are in the Innovator Hub. Gosh, everyone's really hungry. Oh, and you don't want to miss this. We're going to have a little Oprah moment later. So you should stay through the end of the day if you want to see what our special giveaway is. And that's that. Go enjoy your lunches. Thank you.
Oh, I don't see where you got your degree.
I don't have one. I went another route.
All right. I guess tell me a bit about your experience.
For 15 years, I've been managing logistics and mastering project management skills.
Wow. Sounds like you've got just the kind of skills and experience we're looking for.
¿Para qué así?
Esta solo es en el Twitter. Esta es la que se escuche la voz, este lo truena, hoy.